There it goes. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our December 15, 2021 Waterloo Regional Police Service Board meeting. I would entertain a motion to reconvene in open session. If I could have a mover, Carl, seconded, Sandy. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Thank you, colleagues. We acknowledge the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. I would ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, there are no recommendations from closed, and our first delegation is Mark Eagers, President, Waterloo Regional Police Association. Welcome, Mark. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, and good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the Waterloo Regional Police Services Board for this opportunity to provide a deputation as President of the Waterloo Regional Police Association. As you know, the WRPA is the elected unifying voice of the over 1,200 sworn and civilian police personnel who proudly serve Waterloo Region. I'm here today to express the association's support on behalf of our membership for the proposed 2022 police service budget increase, which includes the hiring of an additional 35 police officers. I cannot overstate how much this increase in staffing is urgently needed, both for the benefit of those who live and work in Waterloo Region, as well as for our members who dedicate their lives to keeping us safe. Our region is a growing and prosperous area of the province, and according to Statistics Canada, we were the second fastest growing community in the country in 2019-2020. Despite that, in 2019, Waterloo Regional Police Services staffing levels were the lowest recorded since 2004, at 131 officers per 100,000 people. Just to put this into context, in 2019, we had the same staffing levels for a community of over 617,000 that we had back in 2004 for a population of just over 481,000. That's over 28% more people to provide policing services to, with zero difference in the numbers of members doing it. And the recent population and total household growth that has taken place throughout the region during the pandemic isn't even accounted for in these figures. Given this, it should come as no surprise to anyone here that Waterloo Region's police personnel are struggling and they need more support, namely with additional staffing and improved proactive mental health resources to continue providing the high level of public safety services the community rightfully expects and deserves. The service is constantly operating at minimum staffing complements, often calling in sworn and civilian police personnel on overtime hours just to barely meet those minimums. I've said this before, and I will say it until I'm blue in the face. When is minimum standard acceptable? And quite frankly, it's not safe. Proactive policing is simply not a reality with our current numbers and climate. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, calls for mental health related concerns with the public have increased dramatically. At present, the police are the only 24/7, 365 service available to respond. And as a result, 911 becomes the default number for any individuals who need crisis intervention. On top of that, the opioid crisis continues to worsen, and coupled with the chronic underfunding of other social services at the municipal level, our members are regularly called to assist with overdoses. Additionally, our rural communities need to receive the same bang for their buck as the urban centers. These communities continue to experience significant growth, yet there are still the same number of officers deployed within them as was the case 25 years ago. The complexity of policing and the cases our members are investigating have also increased over time as well. Unfortunately, the capacity does not exist to address many of the important priorities and concerns of the community, such as protecting local businesses from crime or patrolling school zones to ensure traffic laws are obeyed. Additionally, when our members are requested to work back-to-back shifts without enough time to decompress from what can often be intense or traumatic calls for service, it can quickly compound and result in higher rates of burnout, anxiety, or stress. When police services are understaffed, sworn and civilian members are often reluctant to proactively seek assistance for mental health related challenges, as it would further burden their colleagues. As a result, their wellness continues to worsen and they face a greater risk of spiraling into crisis. Our members need to know that backup is available to them when it's needed the most. And I give you the airplane analogy. Our members need to be provided with the support to put on their own oxygen masks to then be able to effectively help others. The association, service, and board have shown a shared commitment to member mental health by incorporating robust psychological benefits into the collective agreement. However, if members feel guilty or stressed about the workload, overtime hours, and other challenging circumstances they're leaving their colleagues to manage while they take care of themselves, this damaging cycle will continue. The WRPA is confident we have the support of the majority of the public. It may not always be vocal, but it can be felt and seen by our members. That being said, we also acknowledge that, especially in recent years, a number of tragic incidents have occurred around the world that have highlighted the importance of engaging in meaningful conversations about the role of policing in upholding public safety. The WRPA and our membership are strong advocates for evidence-based strategies that could look to safely shift some of the catch-all responsibilities from police to other social services. But continuing to underfund and understaff the police service will only serve to hinder rather than help those changes to come to fruition until actual plans have been developed, tested, implemented, and evaluated. It is worth highlighting that police service funding, staffing concerns, and employee mental health aren't unique issues to Waterloo Region. They have been identified by the Police Association of Ontario as province-wide gaps. And the PAO will be advocating strongly leading up to the 2022 provincial election for Ontario's political parties to commit to supporting increased staffing and mental health supports for all police personnel in communities across Ontario, no matter who gets elected. Further, the Auditor General specifically noted in her annual report that these are growing and concerning issues within the Ontario Provincial Police right now as well. In 2020, the OPP had more than 1,000 frontline constable positions that were vacant. And the increase in vacancies is driven by employees off due to WSIB claims. A number that jumped a staggering 364% between 2015 and 2020. As Auditor General Bonnie Lysick wrote in her report, the increasing number of OPP officers filing WSIB claims for PTSD and other mental health injuries is symptomatic of an ongoing issue related to officer mental health and stress. The WRPA is calling on the Waterloo Regional Police Services Board to take a leadership position in the province. We are asking you to commit to providing the service and our members with adequate staffing and proper mental health support through the proposed 2022 budget increase so that public safety services can be effectively delivered to Waterloo Region and our members' well-being is prioritized and protected. Quite frankly, this increase is needed today. We cannot afford to have it deferred later in the budget year. It takes time to get the increased staff complement hired, trained, and out onto the front line. We know this is not a significant funding request, and that is not lost on us. And while adding 35 officers is a first positive step forward, it is certainly not the panacea for the ongoing issues I've outlined. As illustrated in my delegation last year, we have been underfunded for many years. As the population increases and our actual need for staffing increases, those staffing levels have not kept pace. We appreciate the 35, but we know the need is much greater. The WRPA implores this PSB to take a strategic, long-term approach to exploring continued funding mechanisms so the complement of policing personnel can keep pace with population and household growth in the community. When it could be built into the board's discussions in the budgeting process each year, it will help avoid these larger funding requests that are viewed by many as big spikes, but in reality are making up for years of underfunding by previous chairs of this board. I would like to close by recognizing and thanking the women and men who continue to dedicate their professional lives to upholding public safety across Waterloo Region. They are invested partners and members of this community. As president of the WRPA, I am unwavering in my responsibility to protect and advance their collective rights and interests to ensure our members get the most from their careers and lives. This includes advocating for adequate staffing to be funded within the police service so that rates of burnout are reduced, mental health and wellness improves, and ultimately, our members are best positioned to exceed the rightfully high public safety expectations of all communities throughout Waterloo Region. Once again, I thank you for this opportunity, and I wish everyone a safe and healthy holidays and Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eagers, and you're right on time. So you must have, it was very focused and much appreciated and well-timed. Carl, do you have a question for Mark?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Mark. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Mike, thanks for the presentation. It was great. And my question to you is, though, and I suspect I might know the answer, but I'll try it on you anyways. Does the WRPA constantly and continually also include advocating to the provincial government, who are key players in this, of course, and your input, of course, in my estimation, is invaluable for them to hear your message as well. So I'd like to hear a response. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Keever. We just recently had what we call as lobby days, where we go to Parliament and lobby the politicians, even local politicians. We're constantly in communication with our local MPPs. But as a provincial body, we went to Toronto and lobbied for a full day regarding staffing and mental awareness for police personnel. So yes, very strongly.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, I see no further questions. So just on behalf of the board, I want to thank you and the membership for your amazing work to make sure that everybody in Waterloo Region feels safe and is safe. So thank you very much for a very positive intervention and highlighting a lot of concerns that I know the board spends a lot of time thinking about and discussing as well. So wish you and everybody at WRPS a safe holiday season, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, everybody.
Colleagues, the next agenda item is the consent agenda, and that is agenda items 8.1 through 8.6. Are there any questions or any part of that somebody would like to have moved out for further discussion? Seeing that, none, I would entertain a motion to move and second the consent agenda with one motion. Moved by Sandy, seconded by Rosita. Please indicate by raising your hand if you're in agreement. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Business arising from the minutes. I'm seeing none. Correspondence. No questions. Agenda item point 11.1 is the 2021 to 2022 boardwalk plan. It's attached, and I believe Jill, it's the board work plan. I've been on the vaccine rollout task force too long. I read it as boardwalk, sorry, work plan, and I'll turn it over to Jill Eggleton.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, members of the board. So each year the board is asked to review and approve the annual work plan for the board. So it's an opportunity for the board to comment on the work plan for the coming year and to make any suggestions or adjustments. You do have the draft work plan in your package. Just a couple quick things to note. In the work plan, you will see the various reports. They're organized by type. So we have reports that are required by legislation, operational, governance, HR, and strategic related. You'll also see a column titled items arising, and these are items that are not part of the regular annual work plan cycle, but have come up at past board meetings to be addressed at a future meeting. So those items have been scheduled into the work plan for the coming year. The timing of a few reports have changed, or may change, sorry. In particular, some of the reports that provide the results of the StatsCans reports. The release dates for those may change, so we would need to adjust the work plan accordingly. One additional report to highlight that's been added to the regular work plan for this coming year is quarterly updates that report on the work of the impact team. You'll note too in the report that we have 2 board policies that actually speak to the board having an opportunity when the work plan is brought to you for approval to add items to the work plan that might be related to stakeholder engagement or some educational opportunities that the board may want included in the work plan and scheduled throughout the year. So if you have any thoughts around those items now, we can certainly add them to the work plan. There's also an opportunity to recommend these types of items at any point throughout the year. So if there's any questions or comments on the work plan, note that the report does include a motion to approve the work plan.
So colleagues, I would look for a mover and a seconder, acknowledging that I know community outreach is something that's at the fore of this board's mind, and it is something that we can add at a future date. So if I don't see any future or current agenda items to be added to the work plan, I would entertain a motion to accept this work plan as written. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Tony, seconded by Rosita. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. And Jill, thank you for all the work you do keeping us on track. It's absolutely essential so that we keep moving forward. Next agenda item is Chief of Police reports, and 12.1 is promotions. Chief, would you like to speak to this?
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond and members of the board. Good morning and happy December. And thank you for the opportunity to highlight a series of reports outside of the consent agenda. The first is an annual promotional list, and regrettably, as we continue to meet virtually, we did not invite all of these amazing, talented mid-leaders who are progressing through our ranks to the board meeting. But generally in the past, they've actually made an appearance to meet the board and actually provide some background and highlight. We've not done that this year based on the current pandemic as well as the virtual settings. But on behalf of the organization, on behalf of Deputy Hilton and Deputy Crowell, we've met with the 23 members to congratulate them on their promotion and advancement in our organization, to present them with their new badge, as well as to engage in dialogue with each of the members around the role of leadership, the role of mid-leadership, the challenges, as well as to seek feedback on their input into the organization and the direction of the organization. And so we congratulate 6 new staff sergeants in the organization and 17 new sergeants. And I know that as we continue to look at the individuals that are progressing, it's a really sense of excitement around modernization and the progression of policing. So again, on behalf of the board, we have extended your congratulations, and we hope in the near future, as we work our way through the next wave of the global pandemic, that you'll have an opportunity to meet these amazing community leaders and community ambassadors. So subject to that, it's for information.
Thank you, Chief. It's very important information. And, you know, any organization turns its mind to succession planning, and I think it bodes well for the future standards and the quality that we've come to expect from Waterloo Regional Police Service, that we have internal candidates that continue to take on leadership roles. It's, again, the thing that is going to keep us moving forward. And we know we're a growing community. Mark Eagers talked about that, and we need to continue to look to the future. So thank you very much for this, and we all look forward to a time when we can actually congratulate these leaders throughout our system. 12.2 is Communications Center Radio Dispatch Purchase. A motion is required for this. And Chief, do you want to kick it off, or we'll go right to Kirsten?
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond. I can certainly introduce the report if there's any specific questions. We have Ms. Kirsten Hand and Mr. Bob Hill joining us, as well as Deputy Crowell. You'll see that the motion is to accept a proposal from Motorola Solutions for the purchase of an additional radio dispatch console, as well as we'll be moving one existing radio dispatch console for the communications center. It does include a support contract of 15 years commencing on January 1st, 2022, expiring on December 31st, 2036. It's the amount of $222,000 and $222,371, including applicable taxes as set out in the report. I just want to provide some context and background. This is all related to the implementation of the new Motorola P25 Regional Waterloo voice radio system, which included a complete refurbishing and a reset of all of our communication and emergency consoles. As a part of the overall contract and bid, there was 3 consoles which were included as a part of the backup facility. The backup facility is currently located at 134 Frederick Street in City of Kitchener, which is Central Division, soon to be a regional asset. And as we progress through the organization and we look at emergency management progression, it was recognized that ideally we should continue to have the setup that is required, which would be 5 consoles. Internally, we're able to find efficiencies to move 1 console, but it does require the purchase. And of course, you'll see that there's a significant agreement with Motorola for a 15-year term, and that is really related to the overall Regional Waterloo contract, which provides a series of upgrades to support the consoles and to support the technology as we roll through. And this is part of the public safety answering point that we operate on behalf of the Regional Waterloo. You will see that we do have a rationale for single sourcing on this contract. That is based on, obviously, the voice radio communication system is fully compatible with the current radio system. As I alluded to in the initial regional tender and contract, it only included 3. Upon, obviously, reflection, we ought to have actually secured 5 consoles. And we were able to negotiate with Motorola for the addition of 1 console, the reallocation of 1, and then, of course, the 15-year agreement. Again, subject to Ms. Hand, who's our Chief Purchasing Officer, along with legal, and Mr. Hillhorst, our IT Director. We are recommending that the board advance the purchase of a single dispatch console system integration, and then, of course, the ongoing licensing and warranty work in the amount that is listed. If you do approve this, there'll be an adjustment, which is part of the overall budget process, capital budget. So subject to any questions, there is a recommendation here.
So I appreciate this, and at the risk of making a truly bad pun, this issue has actually gotten a lot of airtime. I know we've discussed this at length. Kirsten or Bob, do you want to add anything, or are you just here for questions?
The chief did a great job presenting the scenario we're in right now. So subject to any questions, I think I'm good.
Kirsten?
I just may add that the 2022 draft capital budget already includes this purchase. So it doesn't amend anything that is before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Ian, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Redmond. It's on page 68, and you may have answered this, but I might not have heard. It talks about that only 3 radio dispatch consoles were provided for the contract for the backup site, and so it's been recognized the system doesn't provide optimal deployment. Was this something that, was that what was recommended when you got the system in the first place? And what were the things that led to understanding that you required additional equipment?
Who'd like to take that?
So again, this was a significant
Chief, sorry.
This was a significant request for proposal, and obviously there was a lot of negotiation, a lot of ongoing work with Motorola. We recognize that actually at the end that the package that was presented and approved only included 3. Very shortly after that, we recognized that the optimal deployment for us is 5 console sets. And over the last 12 months, we've been negotiating with Motorola on price points and also looking internally if we can realign and reallocate. So hence we found one within our training system that we could actually move, because the backup center is used for training and other support mechanisms. And then we were able to find what we believe is a reasonable price point to negotiation to add the current console. This was a significant, this is a $30 million project. When we actually reviewed it, we recognized once everything was starting to be implemented and actually moved forward, we went, wow, there's only 3. Went back in the process and recognized that, okay, we actually only costed 3 when really we should have been at 5. And so we're rectifying that for an emergency management perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can be indulged, I've got 2 questions. The first one is the 15-year contract period. And I know the chief touched on it, but it seems a little bit longer than what I would be accustomed to. I'm wondering, within that contract, is there provisions for certain metrics of performance to be attained by the provider, such that if they are not, then we can break that contract? That would be my first question.
Yeah, so thanks very much for that. I recognize that when you see 15 years, it's a significant length. It actually mirrors the regional agreement and purchase with Motorola. And really, when I look at what this does, it provides a series of significant upgrades. So as a part of the negotiated package with Motorola, at different points, what we'll be doing is upgrading our voice radio system to modernized technology. So rather than actually, having the version 1.0 that we've implemented, there'll be a series of version upgrades. There's actually 3, I believe, major upgrades as a part of our 15-year plan. Naturally, with all of this, there are service implications. There are service requirements, and we've actually been addressing those. This project has not been without some challenges from an overall performance perspective, and hence why we've actually, in many ways, been able to negotiate the price point we are at, is because we've actually held firm that, there's a couple of key points around system implementation that haven't necessarily hit our expectations, not only as a service, but as a region. And so that's the really, when you look at the warranty, then the 15-year out push, it also includes 3 major upgrades to the system, and the consoles and the equipment then would be upgraded.
I appreciate the further context to it. My second question is surrounding that same topic, and that is, I do recall in the past there has been, let's say, for lack of a better term, some bumps along the road with this service provider in the past. So, when I asked about are there exit clauses or escape clauses relative to their performance, and seeing the 15-year and then acquiring further equipment from them, and I think about some of the past, bumps we've had, to say the least. I'm just wondering, how's that all come together in your recommendation, and do you feel that, obviously you feel that that's been resolved and we are on a stable path and we have the ability to ensure that we're going to get the performance and they're going to meet their commitments? So I'm looking for affirmation of that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's an excellent assessment. This is a large-scale project. It has been with some series of challenges, as can be expected. This has moved from a traditional, analog sort of old-style voice radio system to really a technological. It is, all of our devices are technological instruments. It's highly sophisticated. And with that, there comes, challenges, and I guess I'll use the word bugs and errors, and so that we've had some actual challenges. But I think we're in a very good place with Motorola Solutions Canada. We have a good relationship. We do believe that we are recommending the product itself, and the actual consoles and the actual technology we're using is state of the art, and we're very pleased with that. There was some customer service challenges, which I believe we've resolved and rectified through some strong engagement and relationships. There are a series of exit clauses. They're all obviously subject to some form of likely litigation. We don't feel that that's required. We're at a stage where we believe the system is operating. It's being optimized consistently. Now we're doing a series of testing heading into 2022. And this is really the emergency management perspective to make sure that we're ready to roll. That if there's a major challenge, for example, at 200 Maple Grove, and we had to displace and move our comm center operations, this would actually optimize our system. So we view this as a good investment, not only for really the police service, it's a regional investment. So this investment is really a portion of that regional responsibility work that we do. And we are recommending that we do advance this with Motorola.
Tony, do you have any
No, I have no further questions.
Tony, would you like to move?
Yeah, I'll move with the acceptance of this recommendation.
Motion?
Yes.
Everybody's not frozen, right? I did by. Okay, you're just seconding it. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Everybody, okay, that is unanimously carried. Thank you for that great work, Chief. 12.3 is the academic partnership race-based data collection strategy. This too requires a motion. Chief, do you want to kick this off?
Thanks very much, Chair Edmund. There is a recommendation to support an academic partnership with the Ontario Tech York University research team to support our race-based data collection. This is a 3-year contract from January 3rd, 2023 to December 31st, 2024 in the amount of $195,000 plus all the applicable taxes. And of course, it would be subject to the board solicitor's approval. Joining me is Ms. Kate Richardson. And again, I think the board is well aware of the work we've been doing here, but I'll turn it over to Kate for an overview. And if you have any specific questions, we'd be pleased to answer them. But we're very excited about this opportunity to work in this partnership, as it's also connected to other police services, as well as sets the national stage for a much larger race-based data engagement opportunity. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Chief. Good morning, Chair Redmond. Good morning, board members. Just a brief overview of the proposal in front of you today. This is a proposal to work with Dr. Lauren Foster and Dr. Les Jacobs for advancing our race-based data collection strategy, which will support not only how we collect this data, but how we analyze and report on it. The proposal is for 4 different streams of work. 2 of them will be an assessment of our current collection analysis practices against Ontario's data standard for the collection of this information. Dr. Lauren Foster and Dr. Jacobs supported the province of Ontario in the development of that standard and also supported the development of the Anti-Racism Act. The other 2 streams of work involve community engagement and member engagement. To further promote understanding in our community and in our organization for the importance of having social identity data and race data to support our service delivery, but also to support how we involve our policies and our member training. Those 4 streams of work were supported over 3 years, working with both academics. You'll also see that there's a rationale in your package for single sourcing with this agreement. We did do a very public call for academic partnership proposals in May of this year, where we only got 1 applicant, and unfortunately it did not meet the objectives of our call. This work is also supported by the primary academics in the space in Ontario. As I had mentioned, they did support development of the data standard, so are uniquely positioned to ensure that we are working with it in compliance with it. It also gets us a seat at the table with other police services that are working with Dr. Foster and Dr. Jacobs on similar human rights focused and data collection initiatives. We are going to be focusing in some specific areas involving intelligence notes, regulated interactions, and source of person information. And then we will get to learn from other police services that are working with the doctors, including Peel, Toronto, and Ottawa on use of force. So we will be able to also enhance our reporting in their areas. So subject to your approval today, we will share the agreement with the board solicitor for review, and then we can advance our partnership with the doctors to kick off in the new year. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, or can defer them to the chief.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just before I go to Karen, Kirsten, do you want to add anything as far as the financing of this? Should we pass this motion?
No, I'll just add that this is also included in your draft 2022 operating budget, so it will not impact the numbers before you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Karen, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a feeling Kirsten's going to be saying that a lot today during our meeting. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate, for the details related to this. And my question is just more of a capacity one. I think it's outstanding. I mean, that's amazing that they would be interested in contributing and working with us on that. There's a lot of work there. And given the fact that these folks are already involved in a number of other projects, I'm assuming that they've got capacity. It's them, and they probably have access to, I don't know if they have research, like grad students or whatever. So they've got capacity and have sort of within their system to be able to do this for us. So it's just more of just a question related to that.
That is correct. We've had a really good round of engagements before getting to this point, and capacity was one of the things we did discuss. There will also be members within the Waterloo Regional Police Service supporting this work, including myself and Marg Glode and her team, and members from our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office as well.
That's great. It's wonderful that we have, these folks that are interested in doing that with us. That's great work.
Karen, would you like to move a motion for the $195,000 plus applicable taxes, subject to our solicitor agreeing to the agreement?
Absolutely. Now that I know it's already included in our budget proposal, so yes.
Okay. Anybody like to second that? Moved by Rosita. Please indicate your support by raising your hand if you're in favor. That is unanimous. This is very exciting. This is something that we talked about earlier, and Kate, you and the chief mentioned that there was a little bit of a wrinkle going forward. It sounds like we might have the right group. I'm very excited about the liaising with other police services across Ontario. I think that kind of context is really important as we make decisions in the future. And this is obviously a very important topic, and one that's part of the focus of the strategy of this board. So thank you very much. I don't see Marg on the call, but thanks to Marg too. So that is carried. The next agenda item is the operating and capital budget approval. And Chief, I think I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond, and very much pleased to be joined by Director Kirsten Hand, our Finance Director, as we present the 2022 proposed budget, really version, probably almost version 6 or so that we've been refining and working our way through. And I do want to recognize and thank President Eagers for his delegation, but his willingness to engage with the senior leadership team on challenges within our organization, as well as his commitment to working with us in partnership with the board and the service on advancing a modernized progressive police service as we roll through. And so I do want to take the board through a proposed budget, from our last presentation on November 17th. Since that date, we have had the opportunity to present the Regional Council. I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Karen Schnarr, who joined myself in the opening comments and through the budget presentation, along with Director Hand as we presented the approved budget from November 17th for the presentation, which you're going to see here today. The board did ask us to go back and to continue to work on different opportunities, particularly around one specific scenario, which did include additional resources. And so we did actually go back and do a significant amount of work internally, looking at opportunities. We recognize a series of challenges facing our community from a larger fiscal perspective, but also some of the challenges as a police service. And I won't go into any of those today because I think we've had much dialogue about policing and public safety in our community. And today is really around the finalization of a recommended budget. And so you will see a recommendation on behalf of the organization, on behalf of myself, that the board does approve the 2022 operating budget at a net levy of 195.7 million, as well as the 10-year capital forecast from 2022 to 2031 as we roll through. So what has changed? The board did ask us to continue to work internally. The executive leadership team with our finance team and our senior leadership team did look at different opportunities. We have found a couple of areas where we believe that we're able to make some differences, and one in particular is around the community safety and policing grant. We do believe that there's a potential to access more monies, and so in the range of $300,000. And so in our granting revenue line, we've increased that by $300,000. We're also recommending that we transition and increase our general reserve contribution to 1.6 million. And so we increased that by $600,000 in a form to stabilize and to assist with the budget implications. And as we actually looked at timing and hiring of the 35 additional resources, we're able to actually manage some salary vacancy gapping and some FTE expansion based on hiring dates, based on when they come online, et cetera. And as you're aware, we've actually already recommended moving 500,000 from the benefit stabilization reserve to assist and offset a series of impacts and mitigating factors around the challenges of benefits and other legislative payments and responsibilities as a police service. And so what you'll see is the 2022 proposed operating budget, which includes the addition of 35 full-time equivalents. Of course, the addition of the 35 full-time equivalents would allow us to actually meet the Big 12 average from a policing to 100,000 person population. So you can see our net budget, 2021, the approved net budget was $185 million. Our proposed budget for 2022 is $195 million. And clearly you can see that there's a series of risks that I'll speak to. That 2023 does create some challenges as we look at how we're managing. There's some risks that we're taking that create some challenges in 2023, as well as, of course, we did forecast to 2024 and 2025. Now, there's much refinement that could be made in the 2023, 2024, 2025 budget, but we did want to indicate and show the board some potential challenges as we roll through. Currently, our proposed budget that we're asking the board to approve has been reduced to 5.6% as we look year over year, or a 3.96% impact on the change in property taxes, or a 1.2% net levy impact on the overall regional budget. And so from year over year, we've actually been able to make some reductions that would take us to a $10.3 million increase versus the $12 million earlier proposed increase. And so from a capital budget perspective, the 10-year capital forecast totals just over $201.9 million. We've been able to make some IT project adjustments, which reduced it by $1.8 million. Tied to the 35 FTE expansions, there's vehicle equipment, furniture growth, et cetera, that all comes with when you add additional staffing, just under $1 million at $910,000 as we roll through. And obviously, that's at the high level as we continue to work through. Of course, some of the risks that I want to spend some time with, we appreciate the work that we've got to about investing within policing, investing within our organization. I'll speak more to that in my closing. But clearly, the grant funding is always a risk. It's not guaranteed. Although one of the things that we have appreciated is that it's become multi-year. So it's not necessarily year to year. We're able to actually lock in multi-year. And so as we are working towards applying for grants for 2022, those will be completed and submitted to the ministry in January. We're looking at 3-year opportunities, so it does allow us to also forecast out. So, that being said, as we've taken a risk, we believe that we can actually increase our grant funding when we've budgeted for $300,000 more than what we currently receive. We're confident around where we're heading with this, and I can speak to one of the key concepts that we're looking at is around call diversion and support for continued diversion of mental health calls for service. We are working with the Regional Waterloo, working with our colleagues within CMHA around how do we actually do business differently. Benefit costs continue to create challenges for the organization, and the board is very well aware of the risk that those present. We continue to monitor that. We've made a series of different pieces as we roll through. But again, when you look at some of the mitigation strategies included in the budget, we're phasing in the benefit cost increases for medical, dental, as well as WSIB. We've transferred from the benefit stabilization reserve to offset projected benefit cost increases. But we do anticipate that our benefit impacts will continue to increase in the coming years. Petroleum will come as no surprise to everybody. We're very much continuing to aggressively advance a hybrid frontline police car. We're seeing significant mitigation of petroleum costs. Also, our commitment to overall climate change. We're also exploring now electric vehicles for non-operational areas. But the reality is that currently our gasoline rates continue to increase. In the 2022 budget, we did have to make some adjustments to 1.7 cents a liter versus 1.2. And we recognize that, that's about $100,000 impact. We do operate 24/7, 365. The majority of our vehicles are petroleum driven right now, but as the board is aware, as we progress in the number of coming years, all of our frontline vehicles will be hybrid based. Overtime continues to be a significant impact, and it's actually directly tied to the issue that we're trying to address, which is staffing, which is meeting the demands of a growing community. This week, we saw a significant call for service at our regional airport that lasted from 2 p.m. until 10 p.m. It required significant resources. Some of those resources require replacement from a wellness perspective, from a health perspective. But again, overtime continues to be one of the challenges that we're facing. We're exceeding levels year to date. We had made some progressive change, but when we see fluctuations in violent crime and demands on our service, as well as we look at all the training and advocacy standards that we're required to meet, we're consistently at different times looking for individuals to fill overtime. And it's really a challenge because it also then impacts the wellness of our members. They're not finding opportunities to recharge. They're not finding opportunities to actually focus on themselves, their families, and outside of the work that continues to call them. And so it is something we monitor consistently. Over the number of years, we've had significant overtime strategies. Our regional scheduling team and our regional operations team continue to manage that as we move forward. The salary vacancy target is always a risk because, again, to meet some of the budget demands, we're actually gapping, mandatory gapping for salaries. So some things may not get done. Some of our strategic projects may be delayed. Obviously, there's always concern moving forward as we look to the future around reserve shortfalls, particularly around the WSIB, capital vehicle, as well as their facilities reserve. Thanks to the work of Kirsten and team, we've done significant work around a reserve strategy, but we also currently don't have any reserve long-term plans around sick leave and future employee benefits that we need to, and we believe we need to focus on. We're using reserve money to stabilize the tax demand, which does create impacts and does defer other challenges. And then, of course, it's the impact on future operating budgets. As we look at gapping and even the hiring process, we know that by moving people later into the year to recruit and attract, that the maximum impact on the budget comes in the year after. So as we wrap up, I just want to take an opportunity in a final address to the board around the budget. I appreciate that, we've been at this as a leadership team since March of 2021. I want to recognize the leadership of Ms. Kirsten Hand, Ms. Susan Wilson, Ms. Jennifer Chang, and the entire finance team, the leadership team. We put a lot of significant effort in this. We recognize that we're stewards of the community. We recognize that the Police Services Act mandates that municipalities fund policing. And whether we agree or not with the funding model of policing, it's the system that we operate in. And so we recognize that as stewards of the system, we have to ensure that we provide the best level of service to the community. And we've been very transparent and very open about the work we're doing from a strategic perspective. I do believe we have one of the most engaged police services board in Ontario, if not in Canada, around innovation, around strategy, around reformation, around transformation. We're also facing, and we've listed the evidence at significant different points of time around workload, around overtime, around our police to population ratios compared to other comparators and other communities. We're the 10th largest community in Canada. We know that we're the second fastest growing community in Canada. And we also recognize that policing is part of that regional infrastructure. We provide system support for all of the lower tier municipalities. We provide system support for the Regional Waterloo Emergency Management and the public PSAP that we operate on behalf of the Regional Municipality of Waterloo. We provide support to the leadership of the Safety Village and other avenues. We also recognize and we acknowledge that parts in certain communities and certain stakeholders and certain citizens would like to see a different approach to public safety and policing. We're certainly committed to that. In fact, we have been advocating for modernized legislation around mental health, around drug policy, around labor reform in policing. We've been very active on that. There are some individuals that reference our system as being broken. I disagree. Every single day, our members are working within an infrastructure and making a difference in people's lives. That was evidenced the other day at the Regional Waterloo Airport through an emergency call, where within minutes, dozens of specialized police officers had secured the airport, had assisted the regional airport evacuate staff, a team of detectives, explosive disposal unit, explosive canine. All of these expertise in a growing community require a well-invested, well-resourced, well-trained and a professional police service. And our members deliver that every single day. Of course, we're not perfect. We're human. We make mistakes. We've also been very transparent about the work that we're doing around culture, around education, around implicit bias and anti-racism training. Mr. Eagers, our president of our labor association, is a partner in that, recognizing that as the lead of the labor, that they have a responsibility to work with the service and the board. I'll end with, I have been concerned with some comments made about our police service by local members and local governors around our police service. I want to be clear. Our members serve with distinction. They serve without any fear, and they get things done. I certainly support making changes into other methods of prevention and upstream, but we must have a community plan. We must have a focused plan. And so today, on behalf of the members of the Waterloo Regional Police Service, I'm asking the board to invest in the current proposed budget. We have a strategic plan that holds us accountable. We report publicly to the community. In early 2022, we have a series of strategies aimed at reducing violent crime, property crime that we've been working on significantly. We've been operating a task force around guns and gangs. We're working with our school partners. And if you've followed any of the public consumption lately, we have a significant issue in dealing with school-based violence and school-based incidents. It's a key example of turning the tap off and not having a plan. Our resources are now actually significantly invested in investigating school-based incidents. And we're working very hard with both school boards, and this is a nod to their leadership in recognizing that we need to continue to address and have youth engagement strategies so that the police are not involved. So again, I once again want to thank the board for your wisdom, your insight, your support, your pushback, your challenging us. But we believe that we're presenting a reasonable, responsible budget that also recognizes that the people that perform an abnormal task in society are supported. So again, we look forward to any questions. Kirsten can certainly provide more intricate detail on the budget changes and financial numbers. But again, we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief, very much. I'm sure there'll be lots of hands up for a discussion. I really appreciate the context in which you have presented this budget, and thank you for following the direction the board has given you previously. Sandy Shantz does need to leave at 11:45 for a conflicting appointment. Sandy, do you want to go first? I don't want to throw you off. Your hand isn't up, but I'm sure you have questions and comments, and I'm sure the rest of the board's willing to allow you to go first because of your time constraint.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry, Tony. So my question, what I'm sort of focusing on in this budget is we're hearing from, as you well know, we're hearing from a lot of people about upstream prevention and upstream mental health, supports for mental health and other upstream initiatives. And so I'm trying to get a sense of the balance between policing and upstream initiatives. And I totally buy into the fact that in a perfect world, if we all took care of each other and cared for each other, we wouldn't need policing. But it's not a perfect world. And so I guess I guess the question as you were presenting that came up for me is, if we were able to divert all mental health calls from the police services, would that make a significant impact on your calls? And can you comment on that?
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, and appreciate your approach. We certainly agree that there ought to be appropriate balance. The mental health piece, I'll give you some insight. It is approximately 3,000 calls a year. That equates to about 14 calls a day. We've done some significant analysis around risk-based violence and threat assessment and some of those pieces. We do believe that actually in 2022, our goal is to divert approximately 20% of all mental health calls. We believe that by adding, and I know Staff Superintendent Goodman is on the call, his team is leading a whole review of call diversion and what that looks like. And so when a call comes into the communications center, how do we actually triage it? How do we manage it? And how do we ensure that there's no police-free response? We've been looking at other models, and we believe that about 20% of those models could be changed. We also propose to continue to advocate with the province to amend a legislative change to the Mental Health Act, that apprehensions can be done by other individuals, not just the police. So, for example, community clinicians, paramedics, mental health nurses, et cetera, should have abilities under the Mental Health Act. We've advocated for that. In June of 2021, our police service was the provincial lead on that advocacy piece. So definitely we can theme out. I think in early 2022, Deputy Hilton will present around what is our strategies. We're currently working with the region around calls for service related to homelessness, calls for service related to different pieces. I'll give you the example. Last Friday, we had 6 mental health apprehensions in partnership with our impact team. We were at a local hospital, but the local hospital did not have a mental health nurse working. So what happened is we've actually done an amazing work with our healthcare system to actually the average wait time at the hospital is down to 60 minutes. But on Friday night, we had 6 units tied up, 6 officers tied up with no support in the mental health and the hospital care system. So of course, that 1 hour now becomes stretched out to 6 hours because the other system is actually facing challenges. And so yes, I do believe we can do that. I do want to actually, in one of the dialogues that I continue to have with Mr. Lochner, the regional CAO, is what is our plan for upstream? What is the definition of upstream? What does it actually entail? Who's responsible for funding upstream prevention? Is it the lower tiers? Is it the upper tiers? Is it the province? Is it the feds, or is it all of us? Can the police service have a part in playing in upstream prevention? Can we actually dedicate resources or allocate resources to some form of upstream prevention? And so I think we've found ourselves in a very interesting, unique position. I think we all actually support a world where we're preventing. I speak about this. I mean, candid conversation with Deputy Hilton and our operational team around the impacts of having, a 16 and a 17-year-old involved in a shooting almost 3 weeks ago. We should all be asking the question, how does this happen? How do we prevent that? How do we prevent a student from bringing a replica handgun to a school and pointing it at somebody? Where's the system? So I think that, I fully support I think we have a presentation on community safety and well-being, which I think is fine and apropos as we roll through this. But what I'd like to actually understand is that the term upstream is thrown around quite a bit. But as a community leader and as your chief of police, I've not seen a definitive plan on how we're actually going to advance and how we're going to invest money. When I come to you and I request an investment, I'm required to have a strategic plan. I'm required to have oversight. I'm required to have accountability. And I'm very concerned that we're moving money through systems here with really no regional lens, no provincial lens, and no federal lens. And what I'd like to see is much more coordination, much more focused impact on this. But we can definitely give you more data on where we're heading around mental health calls, and how we can stream out and what the 20% looks like, et cetera. We can definitely come back in the new year with the modeling that Staff Superintendent Goodman's working on that. But on average, we do 14 mental health calls a day, which equates to about 3,000 a year.
Sandy?
Thank you. If I could just have just one more moment. One of the other points that I've been making is that when we get this plan and this really sense of how we transition from one to the other, there's going to be overlap. And so I think people need to realize that the overlap is a really expensive time because we are running, an upstream program while we're looking at the whole system, and so there is that overlap, and I think we're moving in that direction, and it's expensive because you're paying for two systems. But if I could have one more question, Chair. Thanks. I'm also aware that you had talked previously, Chief, about your total needs if you were to compare to our peers, what that ask would have looked like. And so I'm also trying to balance the cost of the ask that you haven't made to us with some of the inputs that we are putting into upstream at the region. I'm trying to wear two hats at the same time and they don't fit. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, and I appreciate the challenges. I think actually, one of my concerns is even around rural policing, and I know that President Eagers discussed that. We've seen much growth in our rural communities. We've also seen that with growth in our rural communities actually comes other challenges and other social issues. We need to make sure we have a balanced approach in our rural communities. But one of the things we want to do in 2022 is a significant rural policing review. I think as Mark alluded to, he spoke in 25 years. I'm slightly older than Mark and been around longer, is that, 31 years ago, we actually policed the 4Ws and provided policing services to the 4Ws with 4 cars. And in 2022, January 1st, guess what, Mayor Shantz, your 4 cars will still be there. Yet the financial investment from rural communities is changing, and we look at the makeup of Elmira, St. Jacobs, the village of Wellesley, as well as Breslau in particular has seen significant growth. We do need to change our modeling and our approach. And so that's, one of the concerns we have. And so, we've taken the balanced approach. We identified internally as a leadership team that we needed 100 resources to actually meet our current needs. That was the staffing plan that was presented in 2017. We did add 47 resources previously. We've also done some internal reallocations within our own system where we've not asked for more money. This time we landed at 35. We believe that we still require another 65 resources to meet the demands, particularly around the complexity of crime, the complexity of skill sets required. But we are looking at different pieces around cybercrime. The board has now previously directed me to come back with a staffing analysis, a workload analysis using external lens as well. And so we do plan to start that up and come back to the board in the first quarter of 2022 to give you a firm commitment. But again, even the 35 resources that we're adding today, we've readjusted. I can appreciate President Eager's comments around we need them now. I would concur, but we also look at our role in the regional landscape and making sure that all systems have a balanced approach. And so our hire dates are August and December. And so you'll see the full investment to that. You'll see, I think we've split them up, Kirsten, 17 and 18 or 18 and 17. So you'll see 18 fully deployed officers in August of 2023 because it's a 12 months of training. This is a complex job. It's a complex profession. And then we'll see 17 additional resources in December of 2023, fully deployable. And so in the interim, some of the key areas where we're looking at road safety, cybercrime, major crime, guns and gangs will continue at status quo until we get the new recruits trained up, get them fully deployable. Then we'll start actually resourcing Deputy Hilton's area. And I know that she definitely wants them resourced and she has plans and trying to manage those. So hopefully that gives you the context as we roll through here. I do believe we've taken a balanced, moderate approach. I also recognize that not everybody's happy with that. That's just good democracy.
Thank you. I'll call in on my phone and try to listen in, but I may not be able to comment anymore. So thank you very much for the time.
Thanks, Sandy. Tony, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask for a little bit of indulgence as I pontificate for a while, and then I will ask the chief a direct question. As a numbers guy, there is another stat that I've seen, and that is I've heard the 2019 and the growth we've had. But if you look at Waterloo region over a 5-year period, we've had the fastest growing community amongst every CMA of 500,000 people or more within Canada and the US. That's how fast we are growing. And with that comes huge complexity. I want to take it from a personal vantage as my role as a board member. I believe there's a large responsibility I have, and I can affirm that my esteemed colleagues and I on this board do not take this responsibility lightly. As a board, we're held accountable to ensure that there is adequate and effective police services in Waterloo region. That is what we are held accountable for. As a board, we came together and we created a plan. We created a plan with the chief, the deputies, management, the service, and other community stakeholders. It's our strategic plan that you referenced earlier, Chief. It's robust, it's multi-year. It provides the roadmap in my mind of how we achieve our vision, that every person in Waterloo region is safe and feels safe. I believe that this strat plan addresses every concern that I've heard from the community at large in one shape or form. It is not a panacea. It is one piece of a puzzle that we as a larger village must come together to try to bring well-being and safety. When I look at this budget, I see it as the cornerstone for our board's responsibility and commitment to provide the chief, the deputies, and the service the tools and the resources that they will need in order to implement our multi-year strategic plan. With that, that's where I look to the chief, and we as a board member, I as a board member and we as a board are going to hold you accountable, chief, that you're going to execute on our strategic plan and implement it. It's multi-year, but this budget is cornerstone for us to provide you and your service the tools and the resources you need to implement it. So when I saw the budget come through, and first of all, I appreciate you and management and the service looking for efficiencies. I see a reduction of about 2.1 million. As a finance guy, I say thank you very much. But my question now is, Chief, this budget you're putting forward, are you confident it provides you the resources and the tools for you and your deputies and the rest of the service to begin that motion of executing on our strategic plan?
Thanks so much, Tony. I appreciate the feedback and the comments. And in short, yes. We do believe that this is an adequate and effective budget in the current climate that we're within. And of course, it does actually create some inherent risk. It does create challenges into the future. But when I look at 2022, one of the things that we commit to very early on in the 2022 board session is to go through the board strategic plan and actually highlight where we're heading in 2022, what we intend to accomplish. As the board is aware, the chief and the deputies both engage in dialogue with the board around our mandate for the year and what that looks like and where we're going and the drive that we need to do in consultation with the board. And so we do believe that in 2022 that we're going to be able to accomplish this. We're going to be able to recruit and attract 35 additional amazing resources. In 2021 alone, we attracted 61 new hires for attrition. The talent we're bringing into our organization is unreal. Public safety in our community is so bright that I'm very excited for the future. And yes, we're a changing demographic as an organization, but I'm very pleased on all the different pieces that we've been working on. Like any other organization, like any other, actually, even as a human, as a leader, we all have work to do. We all have growth opportunities. We all have to reflect. And I think that, I wouldn't have come forward. This is I've had the privilege to serve this community for the last 7 years. This is the second time where I've made a significant resource ask in 7 years. And in many ways, as I reflect back, I would have taken a different approach. Because I do feel that I've missed the opportunity to support our members in a meaningful way. And I've actually, at times, you get, from a leadership perspective, focused on innovation and social innovation and technology. And at the heart of what we do is human services. And they've been taking on an additional burden, an additional challenge. They're committed individuals. And so when they hear criticism about, well, they're clearing less cases, it hurts their core. It hurts their values. Deputy Hilton and I spent 3 hours with new promotions last week. And we asked everybody their why and their purpose. And it was amazing that I'm sure if we pulled out their recruiting interviews, the why and the purpose had never changed, despite actually this, profession and the current social climate having significant challenges. And for me, as the chief of police, I was very much touched. My values were touched. My pride was touched. And so, when we prepare a budget, I also have to be reasonable. I need to be focused. I recognize that, yes, we're saying that, we'd like to add 100 officers, but our recruiting systems, our training systems don't have the capacity with our mandatory training to make that happen. So then you focus on what can we do? And we believe that by, adding 35 officers, this is a proper investment. But I'll be, candid, when we refine the budget to a point where we're also assuming some risk and we're relying on tax stabilization, we're basically pushing at times some of the issues down the road. And I think, I look at Miss C, who I've been with on the board for a while. She's, always trying to get me out of the circadian rhythm. And, you know, if you look at our last 20 years, in many ways, we've done a service to ourselves by not actually focusing on long-term investment, long-term planning, and actually tackling some of these tough issues. And clearly, you know, in the last 7 years as the chief, I hold responsibility for that. I want to publicly be clear that I hold responsibility for that. Those are decisions that ultimately I can override or actually change. But the budget that we're presenting today, we've had very much looked at the regional landscape to ensure that other areas are not impacted, to ensure that there's money in the system. But again, I want to challenge others in the system to go through what we're going through. Look at the continuous improvement processes that we've done. Look at the system efficiencies we found. We're working with government on innovative strategies and technological strategies. We're leading a digital evidence management system. I do publicly want to say that I don't think our police service, and I don't think that this board is getting the due recognition in our community that they deserve. And that bothers me. That personally offends me, because we're doing many good things. We're viewed as a progressive police service. We're viewed as an excellent police service. And so is it the perfect budget? I'm not sure whatever any budget's ever perfect. You know, it's like renovating a home or doing something. There's always different add-ons and different things you make decisions, but I'm confident with this investment, 2022 will be a better place for our organization, a better place for our members, but we need to commit to a long-term strategy that actually ensures that we invest in a growing community. You know, if we're going to hit, you know, the amount of population at the airport that we're projecting, at some point, the Transport Canada Act is going to require us to have a police detachment at the airport. Well, you start planning for that today, not when you hit 1 million passengers. Mm-hmm. And that needs to happen. And I'm willing to have those conversations. And what's happening now sort of in different areas is not about public safety. It's not about policing. It's about politics. My focus is on public safety, our members, and policing.
Tony, any further comments or questions?
Yeah, maybe a comment. Thanks, Chief, for answering yes to that. That's really what I wanted to hear, and a very passionate yes. I brought up the 5-year growth of our region compared to other CMAs for a purpose, because I think, you know, you could take a different vantage, and I've heard the clearance before. You could also look at it from a different vantage and say maybe we didn't have the proper investments or resources to address that as well. And it is not a failure of the service that we have right now. But I wanted to make sure, Chief, that you and the deputies are on board with this budget, because ultimately, you know, we have a strategic plan, and we want to make sure we've given you the sufficient tools and resources to adequately and effectively execute our plan. So I appreciate your response. Thanks again for all your help.
Thanks, Tony. Ian, go ahead.
Well, thank you, and through you, Chair Redmond, I have 2 questions and some comments, but I'm always reminded never speak after someone that's smarter and more eloquent than you. And since Tony was so passionate, but if I follow that rule, I'd never be able to speak. So I will have some comments at the appropriate time, and I'll leave that to your discretion. But I do have 2 questions, and they follow along sort of what Tony was getting at is, and I think this is important, and it's around the multi-year plan. We know, and I'll make some comments before that we have, and this has been previous boards, previous chairs, previous councils, take your pick. It's obvious when you look at the numbers that we have not adequately resourced policing. You know, take that away from the other part of politics that you described, but I that's what I see. In terms of the multi-year plan, I mean, I want to hear this just clearly, because I think we're going to pass a budget today, and it's presumably going to, you know, it'll get through regional council at some point in some form. But this is a down payment, and I guess that's my question. Is this a down payment on making sure we are adequately resourced? Because I think the community needs to understand it's not what we do today and then we're to a steady state. And I hear you saying that, and I want that to be, I think that needs to be clear, because that's clearly what I see from the strategic plan and executing on what we've laid out and what you and the administration have talked about to adequately and effectively provide policing in Waterloo region. So, you know, I know you could go on at length and you're very passionate, but I want just some clarity that is in fact, this is a down payment and there's more to do to appropriately have policing that serves our community.
Thanks so much, Mr. McLean. Yes, this is obviously we resurrected the 2017 staffing plan that was improved in principle by that current Police Services Board. Some of you were a part of that, others were not. And so, we did make a first investment, and then based on current economic climates, the pandemic, some things changed the course. And those are reasonable, fair reasons for changing the course. What I'm actually attempting to do with your support and your wisdom and guidance is to realign the course. I think that this is a good reset. And then, of course, I also believe that we need to refine and actually refresh the old staffing plan and actually use an external lens as well. Also use engagement within our stakeholders and our community around what that looks like. So in short, yes, and obviously in 2023, we need to find economic opportunities also to manage a fiscally responsible and prudent budget that will fit within the overall realm. I mean, I don't think we can ever lose sight that we're one stakeholder in a large system of infrastructures, and we have to be responsible. And what I'm presenting today, I believe, is the first responsible step. And my goal is to theme this out over the next coming years.
So I guess that leads to the follow-up question. And you spoke about upstream investment, and I'm still not clear what that actually means and if there's an actual plan for that. But I think it's the order of magnitude. And maybe you can comment on this. I mean, if you look at the police budget as proposed, 195 million, and with more that's required, the social services budget, and whether it's mental health or other issues which are not actually mandated in the Police Act, but which we do. I mean, you'll be talking about $2 or $3 billion a year that goes into those services. We can't solve that problem through the police budgeting process. And I think we have a role to play, and I think that's the way you've described it. So I guess the question is, what's the role that we can play to bring the right folks together to have that discussion around what upstreaming means, what resources are required, because we have a responsibility under the Police Services Act. But we also, your point, and I guess this is the question, we have a role also as a community partner. So, I mean, but you're talking about orders of magnitude to solve the problems that people are talking about is the lion's share of those resources are elsewhere.
Thanks, Mr. McLean. I think really I'm looking forward to the presentation very shortly. A number of folks from the regional Waterloo and Lura, a consulting firm, have joined us to talk about community safety and well-being. I think that, several years ago when the provincial government added this as a mandate, part of the Police Services Act, but the responsibility for the municipality, I think, was the start of actually trying to bring all the sectors together, all the stakeholders together, all of our neighborhood associations and all of interested, engaged citizens together to make long-term change. I know all of us want to snap our fingers and see a better tomorrow. I live in that idealistic world. Deputy Hilton will chuckle at that because she catches the butterflies every day that I say, can you just imagine, Shirley, if we did this? And she goes, okay, Chief, settle down. And this is going to take 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's just the reality. I'm one of those individuals that dreams, and I do think that we can have a better community. I've said this publicly, if we get it right, we'll actually long-term be able to reduce the public safety budget, not only locally, but provincially and nationally. And clearly there's work to be done. So I think the well-being plan is really, for me, it's not the panacea. It's not going to solve all the issues, but it will bring people together to have good dialogue about money in the system, allocations in the system, and how do we work collaboratively. Again, I want to reinforce that I do believe that policing should have a seat at the table. We intersect with all the systems, whether people like that or not. That's just a reality. And we've been witnessing that in our community as we roll through. So I think, look forward to the conversation shortly, but I also think, we do need to actually start asking questions, particularly, what's the true community definition? Because I think everybody's talking different pieces. And again, I reinforce that I think that regionally and provincially and nationally, a lot of money is going into prevention and upstream. But how do you actually hold those How do we actually measure it? How do we monitor it? And how do we hold those to account? Policing is held to a high standard of accountability. I fully support that. I think we need to apply that elsewhere as well.
Ian, anything further?
I think I'll let others ask questions and then save my comments because I'll be prepared to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Super. Thank you very much. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if the chief and Kirsten want to answer it, but I'm extremely proud of this board and the negotiating team for one of the things that is going to impact the region and policing financially, and that's the fact that we were successfully able to negotiate the elimination of lifetime benefits. That is a huge thing. And, you know, I think without doubt, I think that there's going to be financial impacts of this, and it's going to be to the benefit of the Waterloo Regional Police and the region. So if Chief, I don't know if you can comment, and Kirsten maybe with regards to that, but I'd like to hear it anyways.
No, thanks so much, Councillor Kiefer. I'll probably do a quick intro because I see Kirsten searching her computer for the numbers. But I actually want to take a moment to recognize the police board. This police board is with a significant series of legacy issues. Short-term, long-term sick banks. We've totally modernized our sick and our long-term leaves. We've also been improving absenteeism rates and reducing sick time. This board also enhanced and changed the complete patrol system for a better work-life balance, which leads to healthier members. And then, of course, tackling the challenging, really a legacy issue of lifetime benefits that no other board has actually ever taken on. And that can only be done, you know, with strong relationships and the willingness of the police association. And so full credit to President Agers and his team for coming to the table. And so again, you know, I would kind of personally offends me is the lack of recognition for the hard work that this board has done to actually make a change and a long-lasting change. Like the benefit piece is a generational debt with no reserves, no funding, and you tackled it successfully, and then not at the peril of actually ensuring that our members are not healthy, because there's other options and investments, as Mark alluded to, around wellness. But Kirsten, can you provide some insight into, you know, financially what that does long term? And it's obviously as time passes, it increases.
Yes. So at the end of 2020, the liability associated with future employee benefits totaled about $131 million, and that was going up annually. So definitely this will help mitigate future increases. Based upon information that we worked with the actuarial, the average value of savings to the board would be approximately $95K per member, assuming an average age of 42 years of age.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Carl?
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks, Kirsten, for that, and Chief, and I know that, you know, when you have you know, something negotiated like that, it also is at a cost. But I think the investment which we're talking about today, long-term investment, this falls in line with that and is a big bonus as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the hard work of the team. You were a member of that, as was Rosita, as well as Deputy Crowell, and again, the Police Association for being willing to come to conclude this risk and this liability that is a bit of a legacy piece. So thank you for all your hard work, and to Mark Egers and his membership as well. Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an interesting conversation, and I want to thank the chair and others for the opportunity to go and to regional council. I'm not a politician, so it's the first time I've ever done that. So, really interesting opportunity. And what struck me is, all of the councillors in response to my remarks and the chief's wonderful presentation was to thank the service, to thank them for all the work they do, to recognize the effort and energy they put in. And I think, across the board, there was recognition and thanks for that. And I'm hopeful that council, when they receive this budget, will will support that by actually supporting the service with the resources that they actually need to continue that work. And I'm like Tony, a slightly different numbers person. So I like data and I like trends. And I think when I look at the trends related to, violent crimes in our community and just, the number of cases, the number of officers we have, I know there's been a lot of chatter in the media about some of this stuff. And one of the things that I noticed folks talking about were clearance rates. And I think I've got a different interpretation of clearance rates, because I look at our clearance rates and, people, others were critical of that. And I look at that, and it, to me, is another indication that we are not resourcing our service properly, because we know that the number of cases are going up. We know the acuity of the cases are going up, that it takes longer, it's more convoluted, it's often multi-jurisdictional, not only within Ontario, but across Canada or internationally. And so it takes longer and longer and longer. So I look at that and I'm actually surprised that, we're actually able to do what we're able to do given these volumes. And so my question is, because, a lot of the data that we've seen over our past couple of board meetings, is related to resourcing. And I know, being a board member, oftentimes, I've been sitting at meetings and I'm hearing calls from communities saying, we need more policing. We need more, in our downtown areas, in our rural areas. We need additional help and, support. I'm not hearing a lot of calls for the fact that we want to reduce it in local communities. So my question is this: if I look at other jurisdictions around us, I'll just keep it, sort of more to Ontario and some of our areas. Are you seeing, Chief, because you just have better information than I, other communities, sort of resourcing their police services at sort of about the same level that you've requested, the board passed? We're looking at about a 5% increase. Are you sort of seeing similar communities saying, yep, we need that investment because we're recognizing that, police servicing is becoming more complicated and more intensive, and we actually need to support growth in our areas?
Thanks so much, Dr. Schnarr. And it's a mixed approach across the nation and across the province. Recently Peel is at a 5% increase. Halton, which is very comparable to us, is in the sort of the 4.5 range. Hamilton is still in budget negotiations. London has a fixed approach, so they're in a multi-year rolling cycle. And they're currently dealing with some significant resourcing issues now, trying to amend that. Ottawa was sort of under the 3% range and saw some reductions to their budget. So it really depends on where you're looking at. Toronto has not settled their current budget, but they're sort of an outlier. They're $1 billion entity. The OPP is $1 billion entity. But when we look at the services we're seeing growth in York Region. We're seeing growth in Halton. We're seeing growth in Peel. We actually, next door in Guelph, we saw an investment in growth as well. I think that it's all of us at different points, and some of it's climate based. Obviously the last year was a very difficult year. We had one of our lowest budget increases in the last 20 years. Partially, we're in the middle of pandemic. We had region had economic challenges. The province did. Everybody understands that. And we also know that we're not out of that particular challenge. So it kind of varies. Vancouver Police saw an investment. The Montreal Police Service just added 42 officers, an investment in policing there. A lot along the line of dealing with gun violence and gun crime. And Niagara is not settled yet. So we do monitor all the different processes. Barrie was at a low rate in the range, just under, like in the middle twos, I think 2 to 3% different. But again, so overall, it's a mixed bag. But when we look around the GTA, what we're seeing is investment. Partially because it's the densest population. It's where actually the highway traverses through, and we see a lot of collaboration. And so, just for a moment, I'll speak to that. The recent funding announcement from Minister Jones in relation to guns and gangs and that targeted approach. Our service has applied to be the Western hub, so that we would actually be the base. We would be one of the lead agencies working in a provincial format. And I actually applaud that approach, because the ministry's taken a provincial framework and they're looking at this saying, okay, let's actually work together to solve. We know that guns and gangs, they're not just focused on Waterloo. It's a province-wide issue. So let's work in collaboration. I still believe that that's the future direction. I still believe we need more GTA-centric integrated teams to do business, but all of that's coming together and we're working very closely with the ministry. So, this investment allows Deputy Hilton in particular some flexibility of managing resources, particularly in investigations once we get there. But we can come back to the board with the official numbers. I'm looking at Kirsten. Kirsten has a good handle on this. I think I've hit the ones that have settled. There may be a few others, Kirsten, if you have any info.
And it's actually fun. Like I was just sort of curious when I was thinking about trends, and I think Peel is a great comparator, and it's a bit of an unfair question, and I'd probably chastise my students for even asking that. It's a little bit like comparing apples and oranges, right? Because I'm assuming that everybody was at comparable funding levels to begin with, and we know from all of the the presentation, President Eagers this morning, certainly all of the information we've had shared, that we're not there, that we are playing catch up right now. Ian talked about that already. So we need to still play catch up before we can, I think, maybe make some of those comparisons. And so thank you for that information. I thought that, like the Peel and Halton, I think that's an interesting comparison. And I think when I look at this, Ian knows this is his lived experience with the chamber, but as we're growing, if we want to attract businesses here, there's three things that employers look to. They look to education systems because they've got families, they look to healthcare, and they look to whether or not it's a safe community. And I begin to worry when President Eagers talked about the fact that we're looking at levels similar to 2004 and similar to, and we're a radically different community than we were almost 20 years ago. And I think making sure that these investments are there to make sure we've got great healthcare, great education, and safe communities is something that I support, because as Tony said, it's built in fundamentally to the strategic plan that we have as a board for the service.
Thank you, Karen. Rosita, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief and the finance team, to bring back the refined budget. I'm very proud of the work that you've done. My question is the 5.6 million that the police do for the regional services. Is it feasible to charge back to the organization? I know we're one taxpayer and, maybe there's a lot of paperwork involved. Is it worth to do this? Secondly, this number is not going to go away. It's going to escalate in the years to come. And then it will have a big impact on the total police budget, which will be very distorting to the public to know that, we're increased significantly. So I'm just asking a question. Is it feasible to charge back, or is there another way to make it more reflective of the core policing costs?
Thanks, Rosita, and appreciate the feedback. In short, from an administrative perspective, we do on the Voice Radio have a cost recovery model that our finance branch is able to administer and move forward. It's actually, if I can make an interesting comment, there hasn't been much discussion about or applause for the regional support that we provide from our stakeholders. There's an assumption of thank you for doing that work. Nobody's actually reached out to me to say they'd like to have the conversation with me to engage in cost recovery. But that's always, I've been slowly with and particularly with the regional and municipal CAOs having a discussion of at some point, when the police budget's under significant scrutiny and under significant dialogue, at some point you leave me no other option that we can no longer do this necessarily without any support. And I also recognize, very clearly, I'm a federalist. I'm a regionalist. I believe, obviously I work in the upper tier, and I recognize that our citizens ultimately are the ones that actually fund it. And so I've always hesitated. I think, as this board knows, I've always hesitated and pushed back, saying, as a good stakeholder, we'll manage it, we'll do it. But ultimately, if the board views that as the future direction, I'm certainly willing to engage in those discussions. I know that, Deputy Crowell, Deputy Hilton, and I are all looking with our leadership team, with Staff Superintendent Goodman, around where can we find room of things that we're doing that we no longer need to do, or somebody else can do them. And do we start this discussion? I don't feel comfortable saying, okay, tomorrow we're going to stop doing this because it impacts other players. But I'm certainly willing to engage in that dialogue. If that's the board's wishes, I have no issues in pursuing that. I mean, I've had this discussion many times. And then on the flip side, what I would say is I spend a lot of time, particularly on the voice radio project, trying to get people to actually pay. So we've gone to this cost recovery model, and we do have some stakeholders who simply refuse to pay and say, well, the region or the police service should pay for that. And so we've just been assuming it in our budget as good stewards. So I'm prepared to go down that level. I mean, Kirsten, this creates significant operational challenges for your team because you do the billing, but we have transfers and we transfer money all the time in between the region, et cetera. It's the lower tier where we actually would be sending out some billing, but I'll speak to Kirsten if it creates any staffing implications.
Thank you. I have one further question, Mayor, Madam
do you
Chair.
want-
Just the risk that the chief identify, and I know I'm an advocate of smooth budgeting, and I want to build up the reserve fund, but I noticed that the sick leave reserve fund and the employee benefits reserve fund is not done yet. So do you have any plans in the future? I know it's too late for this budget because it's very tight, but any plans in the future that we can build up some reserve so that we can stabilize the impact on the operating budget?
A great segue for Kirsten. I know that we've had much vivacious debate on using reserves and some of the work that we've been doing in the risk. So Kirsten, over to you for your thoughts and subject matter and all your leadership on this issue.
Thank you. As you're aware, we did create a policy around reserve and reserve funds, and that's been a key strategy over the number of years, is looking at 10-year forecasts of our reserves and ensuring adequate balances to mitigate debt issuance. We have been successful over the last couple of years of funding more capital projects from our reserves and mitigating any debt that potentially had been assumed through the budget process. So definitely we will be coming back to the board in the spring once 2021 has closed. We'll be reporting on the balances of all reserves and future information as to how we will continue with that strategy, as well as looking at, you're right, those two unfunded liabilities. So yes, that is definitely part of our strategy.
And Kirsten, you looked on the cusp of answering a couple times, so I would imagine that if we were ever to seriously look at a different way of charging for regional services, you could bring that information back as part of that conversation at a future date. Okay, thanks. Rosie, did you have any further questions or comments?
Oh, just one last comment is like the mental health of our force is important too. So I just want to make sure that we have a balanced workforce to deal with the crime because it's not going away and it's increasing. So I just want to show my appreciation to the association, all the staff for the police. And I'm proud to be as a board member for this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great comment. I know Ian said he had further comments and he was prepared to move the budget, both the operating and capital budget. I'm wondering if somebody would like to second it, and I'll go back to Ian for comments. Okay, seconded by Tony. Do you want to make your comments before we take a vote, Ian?
Yes, and thank you, Chair Redmond, through you to the board. Just some comments, and I kind of, some of this is other colleagues have mentioned, but I thought it's important. I wanted to just reiterate them. The Police Service Board is governed by the Police Services Act and the provincial legislation that governs our budget process, such as everything from the labor legislation to arbitration system and previous Police Service Board decisions. Our board has done the hard work with the chief to build a budget that does serve our community, including delivering on the progress of our strategic plan that we've done in consultation with community partners. The budget does recognize the systemic budget underfunding and resourcing. I do agree with Mr. Eagers that this is a legacy of previous boards and chairs. It reflects the growing population and the pressures that we face as a big city, including guns, gangs, violent crime, drugs, and so many other issues, and the tremendous rising calls for service. Adequately resourcing the police budget and directing new dollars to policing needs and additional resources for upstream needs are not mutually exclusive. Expressed another way, it's not either or, it's probably both. I noted one of our local MPPs and an MP wrote a letter to the regional council this week. It highlighted for me more than anything that there's a provincial election coming in June. And I'll be fascinated to see what each of the parties, including the NDP, propose with a complete and costed program of how they propose to change policing in the province of Ontario. My guess is don't hold your breath. I also am left wondering, the federal government doesn't fund policing, so I'm not entirely sure. I would love for them to get involved and understand that they do have a role, but they don't right now. I also noted that Councillor Galloway released a motion through Twitter, I might add, related to our budget decision. As a recovering municipal councillor, that caught my attention. But I'd remind you all that Councillor Galloway was on this board and chaired it for 20 years. And now he has ideas. You can't make this stuff up. Councillor Galloway will know that our board is cleaning up many legacy issues that have been an albatross around the budgeting for the Waterloo Region Police Service and the chronic underfunding. But then again, it struck me, there's a municipal election coming in October. So I'm not much interested in having a bun fight related to that, so I'll leave that there. But that takes us back to today and our decision as a board. Our role is to determine adequate and effective policing for Waterloo Region. This budget is a down payment on the growing needs in our community. And we've asked the chief and team for a multi-year plan so we can properly resource and plan moving forward. Our board has asked for detailed questions about the budget, about calls for service, innovation, new approaches, and the chief and his team and this board all agree on the need to make progress on those fronts. Our board has worked with the chief to ensure this budget is in fact part of a multi-year approach so that the community understands the needs of Waterloo Region. We've done our work, we've done our due diligence, and we've lived up to our responsibilities under the Police Services Act. So I fully support this budget. The work on this budget is completed from our perspective, but now we move on to the next year's budget and future years and how we continue to deliver on the strategic plan that's in place and the role that we have under the Police Services Act to deliver adequate and effective policing in Waterloo Region. So with that, Chair Redmond, I will move both the operating and capital budget as presented.
Thank you, Ian. And if I could just be allowed a comment before we vote, and it sounds like it will be a unanimous vote, but just to say that I look at this budget as a point in time. And I do commend the leadership of this police service as well as the civilian and uniform officers and staff who work on behalf of the 630,000 residents of Waterloo Region to make sure that they feel safe and are safe. To say that we asked the chief for multi-year, we asked the chief to go back and relook at it, and everything we've asked, the leadership has done. So I think this is a point in time, and we will look forward at closing the gap between what optimally may be our officer and civilian level and where we're at now. So I see this as a longer process, and all those in favor of the budget, please indicate so by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Next is monthly Chief of Police reports. So Chief Larkin, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chair Redmond. I just want to take an opportunity to express our sincere thanks to the board for your continued support. This is the final monthly report of 2021. I've done a lot of speaking today, so I want to make this very short and focus on 2022, which I believe will be a year filled with much prosperity, much peace in our community, and quite frankly, a much healthier opportunity for our citizens. These are challenging times. I wanted to provide the board with some insight into, as we work with the Regional Pandemic Control Group and we follow recommendations and guidelines, from our exceptional medical officer of health, Dr. Wong. I do want to let the board know that we've implemented a work from home strategy. This is sort of phase 3.5 and phase 4 of an ongoing strategy. But I'm very pleased that our team, our COVID health and safety team, in partnership with the Emergency Operations Center, on Monday launched to do our part for the greater community to ensure the continued operations of our service. That we anticipate 15% of our workforce will be working from home. Clearly, we're very much frontline and very operational, so we do the best we possibly can. But I did want to let the board know that we've actually moved ahead with that process to ensure the wellness of our members, the wellness of our community, but also ensure we can ensure continuity. 2021 has been, for me, always a year of learning, of opportunities, of reflection. And I want to start by simply saying thank you. Thank you to our community for your unwavering support. Thank you to our community for your constructive feedback. Thank you to our community for picking us up when we needed to be picked up, for that little notion. And I was reminded by that this morning. I arrived at the office extremely early on budget day. I rarely, and actually on board day, I rarely get little rest, as the deputies know. And I like to get into the office very early. And I was at a local establishment in the drive-through, and I got up to pay for my coffee, and the attendant said, "No need. The person in front of you has paid it for you." And the person waved, and I didn't know who it was, yelled, "Thank you for everything, Chief." And then we continued that process of paying it on. This is the community we live in. This is the amazing community that we have. As we look to 2022, you'll see a series in January, February of cumulative year-end reports to highlight the work that's happened in 2021. We'll look at the strategic report and the business plan successes, achievements, and quite frankly, also where we may have fallen short and how we actually advance to the future. We'll put forth to the board a series of strategies and policy positions around youth engagement, around addressing mental health and call diversion as we look to the future. And of course, as we head into being almost a week out from the arrival for those that celebrate of the Holly Jolly, and a special guest in our community that will visit the many children. I want to give a shout out to all of our community for supporting our Stuffa Cruiser. A special thanks to the Knights of Columbus for their continued leadership to ensure that no child, regardless of where they live in our community, goes without a gift, without something to open up. I also want to thank our corporate executive and our corporate communications team for sharing the warmth that will ensure that many individuals that do not have the opportunity to have a roof over their head or can afford some of the clothing that, and a special thanks to Starbucks for their support, that, thousands of citizens have a new pair of boots, have a new winter jacket, or a new pair of snow pants or gloves or toque. That is who we are as a community. And so when I reflect on all of the different challenges, and I also want to recognize the voices that may not support policing. They provide valuable feedback, valuable insight, and it allows us to find a common ground, to meet those individuals halfway, to see how we can work in unison moving forward, to how we can better understand each other, versus locking into positions or simply deciding to go in a different direction. That is at the heart of who Waterloo Region is. It's at the heart of who we are as a community. And I believe that 2022 will give us that opportunity to get back to the table, to roll up our sleeves and work in unison and work as one for a better tomorrow. We see it in times of crisis. We've seen the work of all of our partners jab hundreds of thousands of our citizens to do our part to make our community safer. We saw it just the other day where all kinds of different services, including the private sector, came together to support those that are in need on an air flight that, unfortunately had some challenges. And so as we head into 2022, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of Shirley and Mark to recognize the board for your incredible leadership. We look forward to spending time with the board. You inspire us, you challenge us, you give us hope. You also kick us when we deserve a kicking, which is all part of this. It's gentle, but it's with a thought process for a better service, a better approach to ensure that we do business differently. And you should be thanked for your leadership because you provide significant. I don't think the general public recognizes that at all hours of the day, you receive different updates on a current crisis happening in our community or a major investigation or policy issue. And so we thank you for that. In closing, I sit at these meetings with two very special people, Shirley and Mark. They're phenomenal progressive police leaders. They do a lot, not just locally, but provincially and nationally. They're leading. They're heavily engaged. They're great individuals with great wisdom. Shirley is the butterfly catcher. Mark implements the butterflies. And so we have a unique team that actually coincides with a special thanks to our leadership team. So Mark and Shirley, thank you for your amazing work, your amazing leadership. It's a privilege to work day in and day out with you. And of course, our leadership team that joins these calls and keeps everything moving. But also most importantly is the people that you don't see at these meetings. They're the ones that work 24/7, 365. They're the ones that, say goodbye to their families, their children at all crazy hours to make it happen, to make things move across our region, to bring a sense of safety, to deal with urgent crisis situations. And so on behalf of Mark and Shirley, we want to thank all of our amazing members, and we look forward to serving you in 2022. So again, Chair Redmond, thank you for your leadership. I know I pester you daily multiple times, and I do appreciate the relationship we share at times with a very dose of healthy tension, but that's the important piece of how we get things done in this community. We should pause for a moment. I know that there's been a lot of headlines and a lot of different pieces, and I don't worry about that stuff. I mean, that's all part of democracy. It's all part of politics. It's all part of our community. It's also all part of a very big media business. But if we pause for a second, our community, our infrastructure, our regional government, our police service are the envy of many. And in times of storm, sometimes we forget that. And so I hope that over the holiday season, we all remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for those very meaningful comments. And I can't think of a more appropriate presentation to follow those comments than the one we're going to have. Colleagues, you have it in your package, but it's a presentation from the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan update. And I mentioned this earlier to Karen Schnarr in particular, but we went through a community focus group and talking to groups within and communities within our community that felt there was a gap between how Waterloo Regional Police provided service and their experience. And Karen's often referred to it as being so meaningful and so informative. And that's exactly what is happening on a much broader scale right now. I'm really pleased within the community that this initiative is going forward. I'd welcome Connie McDonald and Jenny Smith from the region of Waterloo. And Connie, are you going to take over and introduce the rest of the LURA team? Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, it's wonderful to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Connie McDonald, and I'm the Chief Strategy and Communications Officer at the region of Waterloo. I'm joined today by Jenny Smith, who is the Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance at the region. Also with our consultant, and Lou has been supporting us in the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan process. And I'll turn it over to Laura to do quick introductions of their team.
Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Galina. I'm a project manager at LURA. As Connie said, we've been working with the region team to help to facilitate the engagement process for the community and safety well-being. I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, Susan and Michelle, and after Connie gives her presentation, Susan and Michelle will be leading you through a bit of a discussion. So thank you for having us.
Thanks, Melissa. Today, we're going to provide some background information on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan work, provide a progress update, and bring your attention to what we are hearing from the community on community safety and wellbeing. And then finally, the most important part is some time for discussion and next steps. Next slide, please. One of the learnings working with the community through the vaccine rollout, and it's great to see Deputy Chief Hilton here, our daily get-togethers on vaccine rollout. But one of the key learnings that we had through that process was the importance of having community at the decision-making table. And so in developing the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, we intentionally created a steering committee that would be more representative of the community and that could provide direction and advice on the process and plan. We then brought together an advisory group of system leaders across sectors to provide insights on system sector challenges and barriers and to elevate the voices of those they serve. This advisory table is likely familiar to many as it's an expanded group of the Wellbeing Waterloo Region System Change Champions table, which has been ongoing in the community for a number of years. And finally, we created a youth advisory group. So rather than having a youth member added, we were fortunate to partner with the Children and Youth Planning Table to recruit 20 diverse youth who are committed to action on community safety and well-being. Youth have been nothing short incredible, and I can't wait for them to present recommendations and advice through the process. We've made it really clear that the voices of the youth are just as important and carry the same weight as all of the voices that we're listening to in the creation of this plan. You know, these youth are our future, and I can tell you based on what I've seen from them so far, we're in very, very good hands. These three committees have been instrumental. One of the most critical moments in this process came at a committee meeting. And Laura had presented a review of 170 different plans and reports on community safety and well-being in Waterloo Region. I'm just going to press this again on 170. That is how many reports and plans are underway, have been completed already in Waterloo Region on this topic. And so the first part of this work was really taking the time to review the work that had been done already. And as we're to talk about the key themes coming in reports and plans, there were things that I would imagine wouldn't be a surprise to you. Things like affordable housing, homelessness, mental health, income, very important issues that I know we're all working together to tackle in the community. We also talked about street versus crisis services and where we thought the plan should focus. At this meeting, though, leaders challenged us not to focus on what, but on who. Who is impacted and unsafe in our community? What are their needs, both from an upstream and a crisis perspective, and across all sectors and systems, and really changed our course. Finding a process that elevate the voices of those facing those barriers to safety and well-being, leaning on all of the engagement done by many and seeking better understanding of the gaps and barriers that were of action. And all of those insights have helped us to develop a draft framework. The draft framework is in your package, and I'll walk through how it's structured. I'm going to emphasize the very draft part of it, as part of that is why we're here today, and engagement is continuing with the community that's helped us redesign it. So the draft framework includes the vision and core elements identified through the engagement session what makes a community safe and well. It also articulates the conditions for safety and well-being, and there were 11 that were identified through engagement. They're all included in the engagement report that was shared with you. The barriers, all of the things that are getting in the way of outcomes are also articulated there, and the foundational things to create, grow, and explore in the community as we develop our action plan to implement the framework. Again, I want to reiterate that this is draft, and community is actively redesigning this through each conversation that we have. And as such, I don't intend to spend a lot of time walking through things in detail. To be authentic, we're recognizing this is a work in progress and it's still changing. But I would like to talk you through a bit of the vision. And the vision starts with the community at the center. These are the people, our friends, family, neighbors, residents, clients, patients, all of us. But in particular, those facing disproportionate barriers to safety and well-being. At a number of committee meetings, we spoke about truth and reconciliation, equity, diversity, inclusion. A lot of discussion was had about whether that was a pillar or a lens or a focus area, or how do we articulate this priority for our community? And after all of the different engagement conversations, it became really clear that truth and reconciliation is community safety and well-being. And equity, diversity, and inclusion, and in particular, anti-hate, anti-oppression, and anti-racism is community safety and well-being. It's at the very core and foundation of what we all need to do together to achieve safety and well-being for all. And it's wrapped around our community as a part of who we are. There are also three main things, which, for the time being, we're calling core elements that were identified through the consultations that people felt make a community safe and well. And those are the bigger dark blue circles in the diagram. And that's strong families, self-determined communities, and accountable systems. We heard a lot about the importance of families and knowing that family means a lot of different things. It can be chosen family, friends, neighbors, organizations, whoever makes up that core circle of support. Families are who you reach to when you need support. And we know that when families can support themselves, there's less need for system support families. We also heard about the importance of self-determined communities. Communities know their needs best, and they're resourced to self-determine their needs and support enhanced safety and well-being as possible. This is about shifting power to community safety and well-being. And of course, this is only possible through a number of, accountable systems. We also heard a lot about the need for systems to work alongside the community to determine outcomes, and then to be held accountable for the change in the outcomes that have been identified together. And of course, this is only possible for a number work from home. Number of important conditions. Thanks to the next slide. Here represent a summary of the conditions for safety. You'll recognize many familiar elements, and some may be new to you. And these are fully explored in the engagement summary that's part of the package. Does anyone want to? Next slide, thank you. Finally on screen are some thoughts on foundational things to grow, create, and explore. And as the process continues to move forward, this list will change. But it hopefully gives you a sense of the conversations that are taking place, and gives you a sense of some things that the community is identifying that we can all move forward together to improve safety and well-being. We'll now move on to the most important part of today, the discussion part, so that we can hear more perspective about the needs and opportunities across the region. And I'll hand it over to Susan to start the discussion.
Thanks, Connie. We're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback on these discussion questions today. As Connie mentioned, we've shared a draft community engagement summary report of what we've heard so far, and the conversations are continuing. So we have 4 questions that we'd like to explore and gather your insights on. We'll put them on the screen, and then maybe we can take them down and work through them. So what does a safe and well community mean to you? What are the biggest well-being and safety needs across the region from your perspectives? What things are having a positive impact on well-being and safety? So that could be, got some elements here, strategies, initiatives, partnerships, or other things that you feel are having a positive impact. And then the 4th is around the fact that there are many things underway relating to well-being and safety. And we're looking at ways to ensure alignment and connection across that work, and looking for your insight on those. So maybe we can, would it be okay if we just take the questions down and have a conversation? Okay, let's see.
It's a great idea.
Okay, great. So we don't have to work through all 4 in order. I'll just open the floor, and I'm here with Michelle, who will be facilitating as well. Thoughts on what safe and well means to you, biggest needs, areas for alignment, and positive impact.
Trust me, this board's not usually that quiet. Karen, please go ahead.
Sorry, it was taking me a while to find the little hands up signal there. And I think it's an interesting question, because I think it's going to depend on where you are, in your life. So my answer to that question is going to be different. I have teenage daughters, right? And so, my concerns for myself, I teach at a university where I've got, a lot of, student populations anywhere, mainly, 18 to, 23 when we're all live and on campus, to older students in my, MBA programs and things like that. So, if I look at it as a faculty member at Laurier, I want my students to feel safe walking around campus or walking home and not feeling like they're going to be, I have had, unfortunately, conversations with some of my female identifying students who have had, issues just walking home, which should be something that in a community, you shouldn't be worried about just walking from the university campus, which is, right in a central place in Waterloo, to your home without being harassed or feeling like you are unsafe. Or quite frankly, in some cases, depending on the cultural context, feeling, as a woman, not always, safe in the environment that you're in. And so different than me as a not 18-year-old, somebody, who's in their 50s, looking at, I want, my biggest concern obviously is for my kids and making sure that, I'm not worried about them going to school. We've had lots of violence, unfortunately, increasing in our community and in our school. So, I don't want to be in a community where kids have to go through metal detectors when they go into school. I want them to feel safe and in a learning environment where they feel like they can contribute and they can, they're there and it's all embracing in terms of who is in their classroom. And I think, schools are doing, it's so different than when I went to school. We had very homogenous populations. I love the fact that we've got much more multicultural populations now here in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I think that enriches learning. And I think students are being taught to be more embracing, to be more welcoming. And I think that's slowly, I think this is a generational change, but slowly being incorporated into school systems. And I get that because of what my kids talk about when they come home, and they're having very open and frank conversations about things, which I think is fantastic because, they've got faculty at their school or teachers at their school that have been trained to have these conversations so that it's held in a safe way. But I think it's only the beginning. I mean, I think they're getting this now in upper high school. I think this is something that we need to see embedded in lower grades all the way through, but it's a huge change. So, when I look at safety, I'm tending to look at this. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, right? Because, well-being and all, it's a huge, massive issue, which is why when I read the package, what I'm really interested in, because it's, you read lots of reports. I've read lots of reports in my years on mental health. And it's often just big, we need more mental health supports. And we all know that. We've known that for 20 years. But so what specific recommendations are there to get us, incrementally into better systems? And I like this report that we got as part of our board package, because we're starting to see some of those things where it's actually tangible actions, because, it's big change that we're looking at. So I tend to focus a little bit more on the safety stuff, because that I'm very fortunate. I'm a privileged person. I 100%, acknowledge that. And so I don't have challenges in, my lived experience with homelessness. I'm fortunate to have the supports I need around me. I know though, that for many people, those don't exist. And so, what can you do to do it? Recognizing that, for mental health, for example, or, I was reading here about long-term care and supporting our seniors and our vulnerable populations there are, part of the problem, maybe we just don't have enough mental health workers, or we don't have enough, PSWs. And so this isn't something that you can, fix tomorrow. It means we need more, spots in colleges and universities, and then people need to choose to do that and see value in that as a profession. So your plan here is an ambitious one. And I love the fact that we're starting the conversation related to this.
Thanks, Karen. And we have heard that from a lot of people, sort of where you are on your life path is also, part of the impact in terms of how you see safety and well-being and some of the factors that impact that. Thanks. Carl?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Dr. Schnarr just said. She emphasized a lot of what I also am concerned with. And that's why she's the professor and I'm not, of course, but that's another story. I'm concerned, or I have a big interest, as we all do, in terms of affordable housing. It's become a real important thing. And with the cost of housing, and not just the cost of housing, but cost of rental housing going up as much as it did, there's many people that are, put in unfortunate situations. And so the more we can do, and we are taking steps to improve this, of course, and I sit on some of the affordable housing committees for the region and Cambridge, and we are taking steps to try to work towards a betterment in that area. However, there needs to be a bigger buy-in from our federal and provincial friends and governments. They need to come to the table and really provide the funding that should be put into the pot for this type of an issue. It also encompasses, of course, the homelessness of folks that are out there, who are living in tents, and we're trying to work with that and trying to make sure that they have shelter and proper shelter. We all know that everybody's life is important, and it starts with having a roof over your head. So that's one of the main concerns, along with Dr. Schnarr's summary there, that I'm concerned about.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Yeah, we certainly have heard about housing and affordable housing as well through our conversations. Thanks for that. Ian.
Well, thank you, and through you, Chair Redmond. This is I'm struck by, I guess the first thing would be just the complexity of the issues involved, and that there's no way that it can really get your arms around it without a community-wide approach. And the community-wide approach of getting all the stakeholders together is always easier said than done. But I guess the starting point would be, the question, and some of this is going to be on all four questions, but what does a safe and well community mean to me would be different for the variety of groups that I interact with on a daily basis. I think Dr. Schnarr said that, Carl did as well, but I think about the work we do with the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and what newcomers and immigrants would feel as being safe and well would be far different than the concerns I personally have. I've got elderly parents and long-term care and healthcare, and I'm reminded just recently that COVID's not gone. It's been a close issue for me recently. So, there's a whole range of those issues. I have kids in school, and so school safety and having them go to a place where they can, and all kids, frankly, can feel safe and learn and grow. But those are all different areas, and I think if you're a parent looking at this, it looks a lot different than if you're someone that's in the long-term care system. The other, would be safe streets. I think we want to have a walkable community where people can get out and engage and be part of the community. Safe streets is important, and there's a lot of pieces. Some of that's vehicular, some of it's crime, some of it's a variety of that, and affordable housing. I think like people, the basics, and I think you've reflected on some of this, is all of those issues, and there's not an easy answer in that bunch, but it starts with having everyone be part of the discussion, and that's where we just talked about a budget that there's a context of how all these things are funded, who makes decisions, and how we have wraparound services. All those things are easy buzzwords, but I think this is the part of this initiative is getting those things on the table, because we can't really come up with an action plan or a game plan, a long-term plan, until we actually have those that understanding to be able to develop a plan from. So, I don't know, there's a sort of some random thoughts, but in any part of my any day during the week, I'm dealing with something completely different. It's not always business, it's community, it's healthcare, it's and every one of those, like if you picked a different day and a different topic, I probably would answer differently.
Yeah, very, very true. And just dealing with the complexity of the issues, as you said. Thank you. Chair Redmond.
Thank you. I've been to many of these sessions and always said I was listening, but I just want to make a couple of quick observations, and I'm going to be really pushy and also invite Shirley and the chief and Mark, if you want to weigh in. Your input would be most welcome as well, because this is actually in partnership and under the Waterloo, it's under the police department that this edict was, or this plan was put forward. I just wanted to say that we could have done this really quickly and checked the box off, and we haven't. We've taken our time, and it is complicated. And I'm really glad we took our time, because I think typical of Waterloo Region, we're going to get it right. I just wanted to make the observation that, and I think maybe previous speaker did, I think the implementation of this is going to be complicated, but that's why it's being called a framework, because it will evolve over time, because that's what happens when you work with community and you let community sort of drive the agenda. I just wanted to make the observation, it was actually something the chief said earlier, and that's that I absolutely believe that with the communities within the communities of Waterloo Region, there's a place for activists and there's a place for advocates. And I think both voices deserve space. They both deserve to be heard, but it's really the advocates that move the whole initiative further. But there is place for both of those voices. So that's my observation.
Great, thank you, Chair Redmond. And it's been great having you able to participate in these sessions that we've been having and hearing from folks firsthand. Tony, you're next.
Thank you. First of all, I want to commend you. I think it's a Herculean task that you've taken on here, and kudos to you. A little bit of a distinction for me, I see safety as part of well-being. So when I think of my well-being, I just presume safety is a subset of that. I need to feel safe. So it may be a slight distinction for me. And when I think of well-being and what environment and community I need in order to thrive, ultimately that's what, at least what I think of. I kind of think of the basics, and I think of, education. I think of healthcare, and this may be a shock for some. Housing, shelter is, I think, is very key. And then, and this is a big word, and I wish I could give you something a little bit more specific, but I would say acceptance, and a little bit more than tolerance. It's acceptance of people around us. So when I think the well-being of a community, those are the four, high-level attributes or aspects that I look for. And I think if you have all of that, you will feel safe and you will thrive. If that doesn't add more work to your plate, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Tony. Other people would like to share. Yes, go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, I'm back. This is sort of more of a comment. The one thing I really liked in what you sent to us too is often when we're talking about this, and I fall into this pattern as well, it's like, okay, so this is all a municipal responsibility, a provincial responsibility, or federal, or whomever. And I really like the section you had in there on family, because I think it's such an important piece that we could, like the region or the province, or, could do all kinds of stuff. But if they're, and it's not just what I think traditionally, consider a family, I think, and it's recognized here where that definition is much broader. It's, your personal support system. And that could be, siblings or friends or, whatever that looks like. But I think that oftentimes when we talk about these types of things, we don't include that as such an important influencer group. And my kids tell me that I am super uncool and they roll their eyes when I say stuff to them, but I know they're listening, because I'll hear them, when they don't think I'm eavesdropping on them, I hear them repeat stuff to their friends or whatever. So I know, that I've built a little bit of a trust with them that, they take my advice, or at least they listen to me some of the time, not all of the time when we do stuff. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that I thought that family piece was a really important insight that you had in your report, because I think that's just at the most basic level, we often forget about that and what kind of a role that plays, because I can have all these other things, and if I don't have that stability and feeling of security within my sort of close unit, and unfortunately a lot of kids don't have that,
Sandy Schwartz needs in.
it's a much harder battle, for some of the other pieces as well. So yeah, I may have housing, but I'm not going to feel comfortable. I'm not a sense of well-being because I don't have those, immediate supports around me as well. So I wanted just to note, I thought that was a really great insight that you had there.
Great, thanks, Karen. So we've heard sort of feelings of safety are different for each of us, depending on our circumstances, depending on the day, depending on the issue that we're addressing at that time. We've heard about feeling safe walking home, making sure kids are feeling safe at school, the importance of healthcare and education, housing and shelter, affordable housing, and a community-wide approach that works with the community, and a point around acceptance in the community. So I think we've got pieces sort of around the first two questions. I'm wondering if there's a piece, and maybe Karen, your last point leans into this one, but the things that are having a positive impact on well-being and safety. And if there are thoughts that you want to share in terms of things that you think are really making a strong positive impact.
Sorry, I keep jumping into these conversations, but I actually think the fact that we are now openly having conversations about mental health and the impact of mental health on people. This didn't happen like 10 years ago. People were embarrassed. There was stigma associated with it. And the fact, one of the things that I think is great, I've had students that have struggled with that, and they now feel open to come and have conversations with me and say, like, Karen, look, this is a hard day for me. I may not be able to come to class. And we build alternate support so to make sure that they get the information, but that, I as a faculty can help support them. And I think institutionally, my school is developing resources for faculty. So, this is not my area of expertise. So I can have these conversations so that the students feel comfortable doing that. But the fact that I even have students comfortable approaching me and or talking about it, I think has been a positive change. And the fact that institutions, we as a board talk about the mental health and well-being of our force, it's a regular part of our conversation. I don't think would have happened in the past. So there's a much bigger openness in some of these areas to actually have these dialogues, which I think is an improvement.
Great, and we did hear a little bit about mental health earlier and through our conversations as well. And so that's great. Thanks, Karen. Ian?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair Redmond, I guess the one thing, and this is since we're only 22 months into COVID, some of the reflections are around that. And I would say I did prison sent. I shouldn't call it a prison sent. I was on city council for 7 years, and we always talked about cooperating and collaborating, and to some extent that was always true. But I think COVID has really, I think there's the one positive from my mind that's come out of it is the sense of there's a more collaboration, there's more system-wide discussions because there has to be, and there's less of the focus on the silos that exist in the community of education's doing this, healthcare is doing this, municipal or business, and we're all kind of talking past each other. So I think if there is a positive from COVID, I think that examples like the business economic support team of Waterloo region, the fact that two chambers, Communitech, economic development, and Explore Waterloo are sitting at the table twice a week. Now, I hope we get to a point where we don't have to do it as, on a daily or frequent basis, but we should keep those types of things going. I think of the pandemic control group, and I serve on those as a representative for the business community. But I'm struck by everyone that's around the table. Police chief, we have hospital presidents, we have university reps, we have the municipalities, we have business, civil society. I think we all kind of see, and because we have to, because of COVID, where the gaps in the system are and where we have to do better to support the entire community, because COVID doesn't respect the Cambridge Waterloo boundary any more than it does, you know, the region of Waterloo to Guelph Wellington. So I think that one way that if there is a positive impact that will help on this is that we don't lose that progress we've made, because I think it's much more tangible now. We always, and I think it was always true, Waterloo region has always been collaborative, but not as much as we thought we were. And I think the pandemic has reinforced the importance of that, because we are in a global context. We're competing against the rest of the province, the rest of the country, and the rest of the world, whether it's healthcare, for wellness, business, take your pick. So I think that in that question, the partnerships part and everyone being around the table and understanding where others are coming from is something that we should be building on, because I think it's a strength for Waterloo region, always has been, but we can really double down on that. I think that's important.
Thanks for that, and particularly sort of your comments around collaboration and partnership. We've heard, you know, particularly from grassroots organizations, how important collaboration is to their work, but also how that needs to be resourced, and sort of the amount of time and effort it takes to collaborate effectively. Chair Redmond.
Thanks, Michelle. I just wanted to tag on to something that Ian talked about, and that really is the impact of the pandemic and the fact that this aggregated data that the province collected really indicated the disproportionate impact on Black, Indigenous, racialized communities, as well as low-income communities. And it's always existed, but I think it brought it to the fore, and it now allows us to be more informed and more vigorous when we address with these inequities. And I think that this community safety and well-being plan is a really good vehicle to go forward, because we need to engage where the gaps are in the systems by those communities. So I think the pandemic did allow us to focus on that in a new way.
Okay. Thank you. So we've heard some areas that we feel are having a positive impact and seeing maybe some silver linings from COVID experience and learnings. Initiatives related to well-being and safety there's lots of them underway in the community. Just wanted to give a moment for thoughts on ensuring alignment and connection across the work. And if anybody wanted to speak to that one specifically. Any thoughts on ensuring alignment and how to do that? Tony?
I would say if anybody can answer that question, I would hire them in a flash. You know, when I started just saying you have a huge task ahead of you, I think it really surrounds the alignment and the movement of these initiatives forward. There are a lot of great initiatives, but how do you bring people together? I think that's the key. For me, it does start, I mean, buzzwords like collaboration. When I think of this forum, you need to have all those initiatives around the table. There is a common goal amongst every organization, and that is for well-being, with whatever their specialty that they bring to the table. And I think that's the goal to keep in mind. How do you keep people at the table engaged with that common goal versus their own sole goal, but the common goal of the group? I think that's the magic mixture, and I don't have an answer for that, but it definitely starts off with a collaboration and a forum of such where you have these leaders and these initiatives all coming together and speaking honestly, but the goal is always the same for the whole group. That's all I can offer in words, but once again, I have no solution, but that is the solution. If you could figure out how to get everyone around the table with one goal, and the goal is very simply the well-being of the community. I think that is a start, and this is a great start. So
Thanks so much, Tony. Brian.
Thanks. I think I'll just defer to the board members first. It's really their meeting, and I'll comment maybe at the end, but I don't want to take their time.
Thank you. Sandy.
Thanks, and my apologies for having to slip out. I heard bits and pieces of what was going on, but I had some other things to tend to. And I'm not sure if this fits in or not, but it feels like a good place to mention it. The community safety and well-being, the one group that I've never heard mentioned is our Old Order and Conservative Mennonite communities. And they're very quiet and to themselves. But I think in this particular forum, I just want to recognize the work of our local police service here in the rural areas that they have done in terms of safety with that community, and during COVID, reaching out and the relationships that they have forged, which are really quite unique. And so I think part of having everyone at the table sometimes is not having everyone at the same table, but having people there who are connected to different places. And for us in the townships, that contact has been the police service. And so I just use this forum to say thank you to them for that.
Thanks, Sandy. And an important piece around the rural lens as well. So we appreciate that. Karen.
I think building on what Tony said is part of the challenge here, and this is nothing new, is we've got, great stuff going on, and you've got all kinds of, organizations, often smaller organizations, where it's all siloed. So everyone's doing good stuff and they're connecting with their communities, but it doesn't help us identify gaps. It, sometimes becomes duplicative, not that you have to scale all the time, but you don't necessarily, do things where you can get efficiencies to make it a little bit more cost effective, depending on who's funding some of this stuff. And I think to give an example, one of the best examples, and I didn't know it until I became part of the board, is, Margaret Shirley, or the chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of the impact teams, right? And I may be talking about the wrong thing, but the fact that there was recognized that there is a gap for certain communities based on, particularly, I'm going to go back to my mental health example, based on individuals, and, it was being dealt off one-off by various agencies. And so by bringing everybody together to the same table, that you can have a conversation with everyone with information and supports, we actually had much, much, much better outcomes for people as a result of that. It is time intensive and it's complicated because not everybody has the same opinion, but I think it is a enormous success when you look at things like that. And there, it's about sometimes knowing each other exists, and so creating a mechanism to have collaborative conversations, and a willingness, quite honestly, to listen to other groups as well, and foster that collaboration, which is very, as Tony was talking about, very solution based, because we want to make sure that our outcomes are actually, helping, the individuals or the communities that we're trying to help. And I'm a huge fan. As I get older, I'm more and more supportive of having really diverse voices at the table. So it's not just us talking to us all the time where we vigorously agree with each other. It's actually having diversity there as well, because I think sometimes you come up with richer solutions as part of that too. So just a little shout out to that impact team, because like I said, I didn't know until I got the presentation. And I thought it was fantastic. I think it's a fantastic initiative, just given, sort of what you're looking at in terms of, different communities being involved.
Thanks, Karen. Chief Larkin, go ahead.
Thanks, Susan. Good to see you. And maybe it's the appropriate time around this whole, what I'm really hoping where we land with this community safety and wellbeing plan. And thank you to Connie and Jenny and the Laura team for all your efforts and work. You know, been in the community for some time, working on different tables. And I'll use an analogy. Several years ago, I was in a kindergarten class reading, promoting literacy. And a young lady, a really brilliant young lady in the back said, "Chief, tell me, like, what does your day look like?" You know, and the book was done, and I started telling them, well, I get up at this hour, I walk a dog, I check emails, I prepare for all these meetings, I go to this meeting, I do this. And finally she cut me off and said, "Your job's really boring." And I chuckled and went, "Brilliant, you're going to have a great career, kid." But you know, that young child made a significant impact on me. And I look at my day as a community leader and as a police leader, the amount of meetings that I go to and the amount of same people that I see, the amount of crossover and overlap. And we're having a dialogue in our community that really, and this is a financial piece, around where money goes. But I asked the question, do we really know what money's in the system? And do we know what the collective impact of that money is in the system? And do we know actually where we're going? And I historically look back to, you know, a mentor of mine, Chief Larry Greville, who then had an idea about creating a table of decision makers, which really born the first Crime Prevention Council, which was a police leader that started that notion, where decision makers were at. And over the course of the years, for different reasons, you know, strategy, there's erosion, there's creep, there's mission creep, things change, philosophies change. And all of a sudden, there's no more decision makers at that table. But we have the connectivity table, we have amazing organizations like Horizon, we have the John Howard Society, we have KW Counseling, we have Bridges, we have the House of Friendship, we have all these amazing family and children's service, all these amazing organizations, our healthcare system, our social service system, our public health system, policing. But we don't have the table anymore where we all come together as partners and we chat and we talk and we build relations. And it doesn't matter how much money we have or how much money we brought to the table, we're focused on solutions. And so my challenge, you know, and the outcome of where we're trying to go with this is how do we bring all those individuals, exactly as you said, around alignment, around unity, around a better tomorrow for our region, around solving complex issues that we all want to solve. We've had 17 shootings this year. And we're trying to figure out, you know, how do we actually solve the shooting before it happens, in the sense of how do we prevent it? You know, the last one was a 16 and a 17-year-old. We had an 18-year-old left dead in a wooded area of a community that needs support, that needs love. But we're not having a discussion. We can't get anybody at the table because we're all worried about money in the system, where it's going, who's doing what, who's leading when. And I encourage us as a community to, let's actually pause. Let's actually figure out, what is the definition of well-being? It means many different things to everybody. What is the definition of safety? It means many different things to everybody. And more importantly, you know, I firmly believe, and I'm in the system, I firmly believe that the region has committed significant monies to upstream prevention. So when I hear, you know, well, there's no money in the system or the region's not doing enough, I go, no. They're doing amazing work. Connie, you and your team are doing a lot of work and moving a lot of pieces. Has it come to full fruition? No, it hasn't. And so I guess, you know, as we move this plan forward, I hope it brings a level of community accountability. And I hope it actually starts to chip away, you know, and our service is guilty of this at times too, organizational ego. If we want a better region, we need to actually lose our organizational ego of who does what. Is it upper tier, lower tier, who pays what? It's actually impacting our everyday efficiencies. You know, I spoke earlier around this, around school-based violence. We become less efficient based on policy decisions. We're less efficient now than we were 2 years ago. Yet we're never been more connected. And so I think, you know, your question around alignment and who comes and all these different pieces really takes me back to that kindergarten class, where the young lady said, your day is really boring. And in fact, what she was really saying is that your day is not coordinated. Are you spending your time right as the chief of police? And so that's my challenge on the work that we're doing, because I think we're doing a lot of amazing work. I just think we need to find it. To Mayor Chance's, I appreciate your kind comments. But, you know, when we're talking about a world of what policing does and doesn't do, We're actually the linkage in rural Woolwich to certain communities that nobody else is linked with. We're the linkage. If we actually look at the Paulander community, where a young man was murdered, Staff Superintendent John Goodman's people are the linkages. Other social services don't have the linkages in there that we have. And so if we can get past this organizational piece, and if we can build the table that brings decision makers together once again, then I think we'll move and advance our region to a much better place. And I totally agree. It has to be divergent. It has to be different processes. It has to be engaging and inclusive. And we should look at all the different pieces: gender equity, gender balance, racialized and Indigenous voices. All of those things need to happen, because in the past, that wasn't our strong suit. We didn't pay enough attention to it. And we have to reaffirm our commitment to all of those initiatives. But that's my challenge. I look at Horizon doing amazing work, but where are they in the discussion? They're an amazing organization. Look at Lang's Village running one of our connectivity tables. Where are they in the discussions that we're having? And who's funding them? They're funding themselves. They're actually scrapping for government grants, but they don't have a fair shake regionally to get access to the money. Connectivity tables are self-funding themselves through grants from Ontario Health, which is great. And thank you to Ontario Health for doing that. But there could be other regional resources allocated. So I'll leave it at that. I actually didn't want to say anything because I've had a lot of opportunity with Laura and Connie and Jenny and team, but I feel very passionate about this. I think you can probably sense that. I think we need to reset our GPS and actually input and download all the amazing collective impact issues that we're doing, because we are. But there's this illusion that we're not. And for me, that's a false narrative. So thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks, Chief Larkin. I don't see any other hands up. Is there anything else anybody want to share? Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Connie for next steps.
Great,
Okay.
and thank you all for the written and robust discussion today. Remarkably, as talking about the framework, we've been hearing a lot about how it resonates and how the themes really across systems and sectors are something that we can all look at together to find that unity and alignment in community safety and well-being work. But the remaining question is always, what action will we take and what will it look like? How will we be held accountable to deliver on it? So we have a number of other engagement sessions still upcoming. We have a co-design session in the new year. We have an all-council meeting tomorrow with all municipal elected officials across Waterloo region. We'll then be incorporating all of those learnings into the draft framework, presenting it for regional council approval January 26th. I will say, though, that this is not the end. This is really just another beginning, because the real work comes through the action planning and the implementation, and how to bring this to life in the community, and how we continue to engage community in delivering on this. So thank you very much for the time today.
Connie, thank you for all this great work, and Michelle and Susan and your colleagues at Laura, and I know Jenny Smith from the region is still on. Thank you very much for leading this very, very important initiative. And I am very confident that it will change the needle in our region to being safer and focused on the well-being of all of our residents. So again, thank you very much for this time. And if anybody has any scathingly brilliant idea that occurs to you after Connie's contact information was there, or you can contact Jill and she'll connect you to. So thank you very much. Future, any new business? Any future agenda items? Jill.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Members of the board. So quickly just wanted to highlight a future agenda item that's coming up at our January meeting. The elections for the chair and vice chair positions will take place on January 19th at our board meeting. So anyone that's interested in putting their name forward for either one of these positions is just asked to let me know by January 10th. That's a Monday, January 10th. That would be appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Jill. I see no other agenda items. I see no hands. I will entertain a motion to adjourn and let the media know that the chief and I will stay on for questions and wish everybody a very Merry Christmas if I don't cross paths. So that is moved by Carl, seconded by Ian. All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Stay well.